Kelly? ask them if they want a mic test.
Do you want a mic check? Go.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Hi everyone, Kelly Beatty from Chelmsford Telemedia coming to you live from the Senior Center for the spring session of the annual town meeting. Beatty from Chelmsford Telemedia coming to you live from the Senior Center for the spring session of the annual town meeting. We're going to get started in just a minute here, so just to give you a brief recap, tonight it's going to be all about the money. You know that at this session of town meeting we always approve the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, fiscal 2016 in this case. Well, there's a fairly small warrant, only 22 articles, but almost every one of them has some sort of fiscal implications for the town. Among other things, there's going to be an amendment to amend the 2015 budget because there are unexpected expenses that need to be taken care of, even this late in the game. In fact, we have some prior year bills to take care of, something that I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about tonight in the context of the school committee budget. Speaking of which, you'll see something different this time. The town municipal budget and the school committee budget will be handled separately. And while the municipal budget will be line item by line item, DPW, town clerk's office, library, and so forth, the school committee budget will be an all or nothing up and down vote. The town side budget is $56.3 million. The schools will be 52.4, roughly in the proportions that have been in place before. But you're going to hear a lot about level funded budgets without any increase for improvements. In addition, there will be funded budgets without any increase for
But we are, but I'm going to wait till they...
Yeah, that's what I was doing, was sorting.
Chairs out of the way. Thank you. That's the only kind I have.
We're gonna have a special town meeting. We're gonna have a FinCom meeting before the special town meeting on Thursday. Discuss that sewer grinder pump article on that 6:30.
Oh, for real? It's George.
So we got just a couple more seconds here before moderator
Very
John
good. I
Curlin
got
calls
your
the
email
meeting to
on
order.
my way here.
As I noted, you're going to be hearing a lot about grinder pumps tonight and on Thursday when there's going to be a special town meeting to provide extra money for the sewer grinder project that has been ongoing. As you might recall, the town took over the control of those, and it has not gone as smoothly as we would have liked. That was applause for the Chelmsford High School Band, who just led us in the Star Spangled Banner. Now to John Curlin and tonight's meeting.
And the band for playing such inspiring music. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
You coming? Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Setting up again.
Welcome to the Spring 2015 Chelmsford Town Meeting. Before we begin, this past 6 months we lost someone very dear to us who was a long-standing town meeting representative, was a long-standing school committee member, and also our representative to the Massachusetts House of Representatives, Carol Clevin. So please, we'll have a moment of silence in her memory. Thank you. Right now I'm going to turn over the meeting to Honorina Maloney. She's going to swear in the town meeting reps who were recently elected.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. All newly elected and re-elected town meeting representatives, please stand. Please raise your right hand, and I will begin with I state your name, and you will state your name and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear and affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a town meeting representative according to the bylaws and charter of the town of Chelmsford, the laws of the Commonwealth, and the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. You are duly sworn. Congratulations. Thank you for serving.
Thank you, Mrs. Maloney. I have a few announcements, and there are some procedural changes, so just bear with me for a moment. The fire exits are located up the sides of the building and also at the rear of the hall. Okay. I've been asked to request that if you leave the meeting early, kindly drop off your electronic voting devices with the checkers at the front of, in the front hall. And every year I have to make these opening remarks, so they're a little different, so bear with me. I would like to welcome all the town meeting reps to tonight's meeting. You will notice that we have 2 screens to try to address the difficulties that some representatives have had reading the articles on which you will be voting. The warrant articles will appear on both screens, as will amendments. However, the voting results will only be on the screen to my right, I believe. We are trying something new to assist town meeting representatives as well as the viewers at home. You will now be able to view the slides on the screen, including amendments to warrant articles, on your iPads, laptops, computers, and other smart devices, even though some people aren't happy with that. You can't log in? Okay. The simple login information, for those of you who can, to the building's Wi-Fi is you type in TOC-guest and use the password Chelmsford Lions, all lowercase, one word, and then type in slides.chelmsfordtv.org. You can also do this at home. The slides.chelmsfordtv, you don't have to log into the Wi-Fi at home. I would like to thank Chelmsford Telemedia for their assistance in trying to address this issue, and we will continue to work to ensure that all of you have the ability to read not only warrant articles as originally presented, but also as amended. We are having a technical glitch here. I will not be able to see the votes on the screen up here that I normally look at. To the extent that I cannot see them on the screen to my right, Ted Luter will announce the results if I am unable to see them. Yeah, I can see that as well. Okay. All amendments will be submitted on forms which you can get from either the town clerk or myself. If you know prior to town meeting that you intend to file an amendment, you can see me or Onorina Maloney prior to the meeting for the form, or you can email them to me, and I will make the necessary copies and distribute them to town council and the typist so that they will be ready before town meeting begins. If you get it to either of us prior to the introduction of that article, town council should have the opportunity to review the amendment, which will expedite the meeting. This form will create an original in 3 copies. The top white copy will go to me, the yellow copy to the amendment assistant, which will be someone at the table there with Paul Cohen and Ted and everybody else. The pink copy will go to Ona Marina, and the orange copy you retain for your own records. All questions and debate shall emanate from the microphone facing the moderator in the center of the hall and shall go through the moderator. Board or committee members or other town officials or department heads may use other microphones to answer questions or provide information to the meeting. Speakers shall refrain from rhetorical or argumentative questions during the question and answer period and shall only ask questions seeking needed information. The question shall be in the who, what, when, where, or why mode. They should not start or end with, isn't it true or wouldn't you admit? Those are best saved for debate, and I would prefer not to have to rule questions out of order, but I am bound by the laws and regulations that define our conduct, and I will do my best to enforce them fairly and respectfully. I will allow a reasonable amount of time for follow-up questions, but I will have to intervene if an individual is asking an excessive number of follow-up questions. With respect to debate, speakers are encouraged to be brief. Please do not refer to any speaker by name. The proper designation is to call him or her the previous speaker. Please refrain from personal attacks. Challenging or arguing in opposition to another's position is fair game and is what this meeting is all about. Intentional slander against any individual or group cannot be tolerated. Let us refrain from repeating arguments that have already been made, but new ideas or distinctions are welcome and encouraged. Discussions of pending litigation will not be permitted unless specifically included in the warrant article being debated. If during the course of debate I observe several speakers on one side of an issue but none in opposition, I will interrupt debate to inquire if there are any who wish to express an opposing position or offer an amendment. If there is none, I shall end debate and move the question. If there is opposition, I will move that party to the front of the line and allow debate to continue. I trust that you will all appreciate how this will advance our mutual goal of moving town meeting along. Those who may be next in line, should I ever have to exercise this process, you have my apologies in advance. There will not be any debating from the sponsor's podium. They may answer questions during question and answer and during debate, but should they want to engage in debate, they would have to queue up in line like everyone else. A person should not speak a second time until everyone has had an opportunity to speak, unless the previous speaker wishes to correct or dispute a statement of fact made by a previous speaker. This privilege will be narrowly construed by the moderator. Out of respect for the presenters and your fellow town meeting reps, I must respectfully request that there be no conversations at your tables. If I can hear background discussions here, it means that there may be reps who cannot hear the discussion, questions, and answers or debate. If you need to discuss something, kindly leave the room out of respect for the other representatives. Thank you. At this time, I would like you all to check your electronic devices to determine whether or not we have a quorum. 6. Thank you. For the record, there is a quorum. I also, for the record, have reviewed the warrant article for tonight's town meeting, and it is duly executed by all the appropriate parties and has been duly posted by William E. Spence, the constable. So that has been officially completed. Thank you. Okay. I have a list of individuals who require your approval before they may be permitted to address town meeting. I will read the list and call for a vote. If someone has a problem with any member of that, they may approach the microphone. Frank Antonelli from Dunstable, Ted Luter, who lives in Lowell, Anne Marie Fiore from Methuen, Jean Savoy from Bolton, Gabrielle White from Haverhill. Okay. Gabrielle White is the director of curriculum for Neshoba Tech, and the business manager is Jean Savoy. Anne-Marie Fiore is the IT person in town, and Frank Antonelli is the business manager, if you will, for the school department. So I will entertain a motion to approve this slate.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, raise your tickets. Opposed? Passes. Thank you. The first order of business, Article 1, is the reading of the reports of town officers and committees. Mr. Town Manager.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, and good evening, town meeting representatives. As is customary at every spring and fall annual town meeting, we begin with hearing the reports of officers and committees in the town, provide an update of events that have happened since our last town meeting. This evening, we have 3 presentations. The first will be by Patrick Maloney, who's the co-chair of the Permanent Building Committee. Then we'll hear from Scott Davidson regarding the 7 North Road Committee, which was formed after a fall town meeting. And then Brian Latino will quickly speak regarding the status of the 101 Mill Road Committee, another committee that was established after the actions of the fall annual town meeting. So without further ado, I'll turn the microphone over to Patrick Maloney.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Patrick Maloney. I'm co-chairman of the Permanent Building Committee. Here to do our semi-annual report. We'll start with naming the members of the committee. Those members over the past term since we've been here last are myself as co-chairman, Dave Duane as co-chairman, Kathy Howe, who it saddens me to report passed away over the winter, so she is no longer a member of our committee, and she is missed greatly, and just wanted to extend our best wishes to her family, and we'll miss her greatly. Eric Johnson is part of the committee, Daniel Morse, Joseph Green, Gary Persichetti, and Steve Roberts. We have some changes coming up on the committee as we go through the next couple of months, not only with the passing of Kathy, but Daniel Morse and Joe Green are resigning from the committee. Joe has taken a job opportunity down in North Carolina, and Daniel has some health problems that prevent him from attending many of the meetings, so he's resigning, and we want to extend a warm thank you to them for their service to the community. And the other change that'll be happening is at the end of June, my appointment is up, and I will not seek reappointment to the Permanent Building Committee, so I will be leaving the committee as well. So having said all that, thank you to Joe and Daniel, and best to Kathy's family. All right, we'll start out with the Central Fire Headquarters tonight. Project is 100% complete. We currently have no claims or disputes. Everything went very well down the stretch. We're still working out several small items in punch lists. Due to the winter, there was many punch list items for masonry and so on that was not able to be completed, so we're working on all that now. We're meeting with the contractor tomorrow to start to finalize the budget, and everything went well. We are on budget, and we completed the project for $8.3 million. I might add that while we're talking about our cost of $8.3 million, Westford just approved looking for the funding for a $12.8 million station. So once again, I think we did very well with our program, and we don't spend 50% over what everybody else pays around us. So kudos to the committee for a job well done. The ribbon cutting was on December 13th, and everything went well, and the station's working great for the men. A couple of pictures of the project. That's the entrance to the fire headquarters. You can see that we now have the room and the height for all the large equipment. That's a picture of the new ladder truck, I believe. So the men are in, they're settled, great facility. And you can see that we've got all the things we originally wanted in the programming. This is just a shot of the training room, which resides in the lower level of town offices. That's what helped us save some money here by utilizing some empty space within the existing building. And you can see that the men now have comfortable surroundings to spend their time when they are on duty. So glad to report that all went well, on budget, and good luck to the men and the station and Chief Curran for a job well done. Okay, the next project I want to talk about is 7 North Road. We recently said goodbye to an old friend, our building that we had been familiar with since the 1950s. That was a picture of the building that was there. This project went very well. We're about 95% complete with the project at this point. You can see the equipment there doing final grading and filling of the site. At this point in the project, we'll be looming and seeding the project and leaving that, and there is another committee that will be reporting this evening on the work that they will be doing to determine the future uses for that property. So once again, you can see final grading and filling going on, and we had originally been allocated by this body $150,000 for the project. To date, we've spent $101,030. We are waiting for final numbers to come in on the asbestos monitoring that went on there, but we should be right in that area, so we anticipate on this project turning back to the town low to mid $40,000 range coming back. Bidding went well on this one, and we got some good bids, and the job was executed very cleanly, so no major problems there to report. We'll be returning money on that. The final project I want to talk about this evening is the library storage building that this body approved funds for about 2 years ago. $100,000 was approved to build a storage building on the site. We started to look at that, and because of some wetlands issues and so on, we found that it was hard to incorporate that building while the Dutton House was in existence. The Dutton House, like 7 North Road, will be coming down in the next couple of weeks to clear way for a new storage building and some new site work improvements that will be done by the Scaboria Trust Fund monies. So what you can anticipate here is going forward, the Dutton House will come down. There'll be planning of site work, additional parking, programming space, maybe patio spaces, things like that, that'll happen. And there'll be a lot of people working on this over the summer. The library trustees will be working on this. The Friends of the Library will be working on this project. The Permanent Building Committee, Library Administration, and so on. So I note that only because there'll be a lot of hard work that's done by a lot of volunteers over the summer on this project. And the other thing with this project is we'll be probably starting to incorporate some of the elements of the Center Master Village plan because it gives us the opportunity to incorporate the raised walk over to Bartlett Park and some of the sidewalks and things like that. So some exciting things will happen around that property. There'll be a lot of hard work that's done by a lot of volunteers. So please pay attention, and it's a little disheartening when folks come back after a project's planned and ready for execution to hear that I didn't know about it. So while I'm all for transparency, don't expect a phone call saying everything that's going to go on in this project. And please encourage your selectmen liaisons to go to a meeting so we can get some public information every couple of weeks on the important projects that this town does. So that's just another picture of the library site, and that's probably roughly where the raised crosswalk will go. So again, it's all to be incorporated, and a lot of work by different people. Planning board and conservation will be involved at the end when the planning is done. So just a heads up on that project. It's coming down the road. So looking forward, we see this slide pretty much every time I come here. This will be my last time presenting as a member of the Permanent Building Committee, but going forward, we still have a DPW project to complete. The vehicle maintenance bays, above and beyond everything else, if there could be some funding for that, that would get the final folks, the mechanics, over from Richardson Road over to Alpha Drive and really complete the project. The fueling islands, wash bays, final site development, and final office renovations and such can be completed in the future, but the real consideration here is that we think hard about trying to find a way to get the maintenance bays over to Alpha Road. Library storage building I talked about, 7 North Road. Some kind of project may come out of the next committee's work, so that'll be upcoming. And as I always do, a reminder that at some point we have to get back to the schools, although they're in good shape, and the capital budget has helped to keep the schools in good shape. We still have pods that are over 20 years old now that will need to be taken care of in the near future. So we need to work on that and progress and take care of our schools as well. And just a quick word about capital. Capital's done amazing things to get all the schools up to date with good infrastructure. We're not building new high schools for $100 million like many of our neighbors. So capital is very important to the town and to this committee because it keeps things maintained and up to date. Having been somebody who was a point guy on the school project early on, I constantly heard that, well, you didn't maintain it, you didn't take care of it, why should we give you the money? The fact is there wasn't much of a capital budget back then. There is today. It does wonders. There's at least a 5-year backlog, so it is important to maintain what we spend currently on capital, and I have reservations about cutting the capital budget because in the future you will get those types of things. You didn't maintain your buildings, you didn't take care of your stuff, and I'm guessing that some of the people that want to cut the capital budget will be the first in line 5 or 10 years from now saying that you didn't take care of your stuff. So please don't cut the capital budget. And finally, I'll just say thank you to many of you that supported me through the years, and look forward to working with you again. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. I now would like to call Scott Davidson to do a presentation regarding the 7 North Road Committee.
Capital? Yeah. It's not going anywhere.
Good evening. My name is Ed Atchison. I'm chairman of the 7 North Road Committee.
Yeah, I'm Scott Davidson. I'm the clerk on the committee.
The committee was formed back in January. We had our first couple of meetings with a mission statement of trying to figure out what to do with the property at 7 North Road. And the mission for that is basically speak to the people of Chelmsford, listen to the people of Chelmsford, any active organizations or groups in Chelmsford have an interest in 7 North Road and what they'd like to see there, collect that input, evaluate it as a committee, and then from there present the best options to the Board of Selectmen where they will then decide what happens next. The committee consists of 7 members. We do have 1 vacancy, but Fred Merriam, Paul McDougall, David Antonelli, and Glenn Thorne are also on the committee, along with Scott and myself. Our first action is to find out what 7 North Road is. What are the dimensions of the property? What use is possible for that site? So the lot we found out is just barely over 1/4 of an acre. It does have 2 easements that run across the front of it for National Grid and Verizon. And there are some restrictions to that property. It's a public zoned piece of property. So that limits greatly what can be placed in that location. Anything that would go outside of that scope would have to come for a zoning change. So any type of retail could not be put there or anything of that sort. It also sits in the Chelmsford Historic District area. So any proposals or any type of design that would go in there would have to meet the criteria of the Historic District Committee. We next put together a timeline. And that timeline was pretty much to keep us on track so we didn't wander anywhere. So for March and April was to establish the goals and put together a website and then make that publicly available. Also for April is to present to you the town meeting reps and let you know what's going on and officially announce that we are now seeking public input for this property. In May, we hope to have some type of a site walk if it's possible. If we don't get too much rain, it gets too muddy and the grass starts growing. Perhaps we can get in there, take a walk around, see what it looks like. But through the months of May and June, we will set up some specific nights where we'll be looking for people to come forward and give their thoughts and ideas. Also during this time, we will be sending out letters to organizations that we know commonly use the Chelmsford Common and to the abutters and other people interested in that area to come and have their chance to come forward and give their thoughts and ideas on what they'd like to see go there. And around the end of June through August, begin to evaluate all the proposals that we'll have received and take a look at what's best. That doesn't mean that during that time we're going to cut off any input. We will continue to welcome input on proposed uses. Then hopefully after we make our final recommendations at the end of August, sometime during the month of September, finalize the results and present them to the Chelmsford Board of Selectmen.
Great. So just to talk briefly about some of the accomplishments we've had so far, you'll notice at the top of every slide here there's a website. So we've created a website that houses all the information one might want to find out about what's up with the property, what we're looking to do with it. So that link will bring you there. On that homepage, we've put together a Q&A. We've also put together a proposal guide, and we've got some links to some other related items, which would be like the historic district guidelines, and there's contact information for all of the members of the committee. So we're trying to be really open here. There's actually a link in there that will send an email that will go to every member of the committee. So any suggestions you might have or questions that you might have, you can click on that link and it just it automatically generates an email to all of us for that. So for the proposal format, what we're asking, and this is sort of like Ed was mentioning, is sort of our formal solicitation to the public as well, especially to the abutters and to people who use the town common frequently. We want you to really ask yourselves 4 questions and try to provide answers to us when you're submitting any proposals for what you think might belong on the site. That would be, what is your idea? How will the community benefit from your proposal? How will it be funded? And then obviously going into the future, how will it be maintained? So those are the kinds of things that we want people thinking about before just sort of submitting willy-nilly ideas, just sort of having a total idea of how this project benefits the community and how it can be funded along those lines. As Ed mentioned, our next steps include really sort of getting the word out there. We intend to advertise for input through our website. Obviously, here at town meeting, we're going to be putting notices up on local access television, as well as talk shows and newspapers. So we're really trying to get the word out there that we're looking for as many ideas as possible so that we can, get the get a lot of ideas in and generate some good, solid conversation around the site. And as I mentioned, we're going to send out specific mailings to the abutters of the area and to those who frequently use the common.
He ran out of space.
And I think that's about it. Yeah, we're going to schedule a site walk for sometime in May or June, and there's all sorts of ways that you can send your ideas to us. As I said, we've got an email address, 7north.road@gmail.com. You can email through the website or separately, and we also meet. So our meetings are all posted on the town website, and we have all of our agendas and meeting minutes are there. We have an open session scheduled for all of our meetings, so we welcome any members of the public to attend one of our meetings if they would like to communicate to us through that way. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And now, Mr. Moderator, the final presenter is Brian Latina regarding the 101 Mill Road Committee.
Hi, my name is Brian Latina. The town meeting created a committee at the last meeting to look at 101 Mill Road. And for those of you not familiar with it, it's the building that on Mill Road, right next to the soccer field, kind of in between South Row School and the soccer field. The building is a circa 1816 building. We discovered that it actually has some connection to England. The King of England, more than 300 years ago, deeded that and about 400 some odd acres to a gentleman by the name of Sam Adams for the purpose of creating a mill there. That mill pond, in theory, is still controlled by the owner of that property, actually right next door, 99 Mill Road, has the right to raise and lower that pond at will, according to the King of England. Our committee, next slide. Our committee was set up to evaluate the potential uses of the property at 101 Mill Road, and the committee is to report its findings to both the Board of Selectmen and town meeting. And I'll be brief. This committee's just been formed recently. We had lots of snow, and we just did a walkthrough this past weekend for our first foray into the building. Next slide. Committee members consist of Marty Spalding, Bill Griffin, Curtis Burton, Hugh Evans, Louis Chris, Jennifer McGuinn, and myself, Brian Latina. And finally, again, making it brief, we'll have a larger discussion at the next town meeting when we have some findings and some ideas from the public. The 101 Mill Road Committee is looking for input from the public. We will have a walkthrough and an open house probably in the May timeframe. And we're looking for any information that y'all might have about the history of the building. Anyone that would like to look it up, there is a little bit of history out on the town historic website. I think you'll find it quite fascinating. The Sam Adams I was mentioning is more than 100 years older than the one that we all know and can visit the results of his work over at John Harrington's. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Mr. Manager?
Article 2. Article 2, again, customary placement at the beginning of town meeting is amendments to the current fiscal year operating budget. Since we last gathered 5 months ago, we've had an interesting time during the winter months and so forth, and as is the course of events in the town, things pop up that weren't expected, and so we have some transfers and some supplemental funding requests, and also there are 5 of them total, and I'll briefly go through those. The first is an amendment to line item number 2, which is municipal administration expenses. We're seeking a supplemental appropriation of $18,000, And we look over all the items in the municipal administration expenses, and we believe we may run short. And the big driver in terms of looking at what happened versus what we expected was the need to purchase new voting booths. And many of you probably in this room saw the new equipment. This really was independent of the voting consolidation. As we came out and gathered the equipment, this is something that falls below the threshold of a capital item. But as we got looking at the equipment, it was determined that we really, for the safety and practicality of voting, we needed to secure new booths. And our town clerk, Honorina Maloney, oversaw that project, and the feedback we had was very positive. People, the booths are sturdy, and they have lights and so forth. And so, again, it's something that we didn't foresee when we started pulling the voting booths out. The next one has to do with public safety expenses, line item number 5. And what we're seeking here is a authorization to expend insurance proceeds. What's behind all this is last fall, late in the early winter, we had one fire engine vehicle went off the road. Unfortunately, there were no other vehicles involved and suffered some undercarriage damage. The question comes up as we did submit and received insurance coverage. The case here is in order to expend the insurance proceeds is a Massachusetts general law regarding most things we do in finance, and this one is a bit dated in terms of the dollar amount, but basically Chapter 44, Section 53 of Mass General Laws authorizes a town to expend up to $20,000 without appropriation of insurance proceeds towards repairs. Well, wouldn't you know it, this came up to $20,497. So we did have the fire apparatus fixed, it's back in service, but to make the budget whole to finish the year, we need your authorization to expend the $20,497 in insurance proceeds and put it back into his operating budget. The next item is line item 10, has to do with municipal facilities expenses. And this really, again, sort of comes into things that were unforeseen as we've sort of pulled the operations of the year together. We've since the time we gathered, we've received a triennial report on asbestos conditions in the Chelmsford Public Schools. That report came out with immediate action items that really need to be done the next 90 to 120 days. In terms of asbestos remediation, and so that cost was $60,000. There were other items that were unforeseen that were extraordinary. We had to spend over $5,000 on HVAC work at the police station. The South Fire Station roof, which we did have in our capital plan for replacement, just didn't survive the winter. The roof leaked. We had to temporarily relocate the firefighters in the station to another area within the station. We brought out the roofing people with the ice dams and damage. It was deemed that rather than doing a repair, it was to move up and accelerate the replacement of that roof. And so included in this total is $40,000 to do that work. In addition, we had problems with the South Row School fire alarm that were over $10,000. There was a period of time where there was a unsafe condition in the treasurer's collector's office with the ceiling, which again, it's a 100-year-old building, and we had to basically vacate that office area because of the weight of that ceiling, and we had to spend over $5,300 to replace that. We also had to do significant work at the Harrington School fire alarm at over $12,000, and we had to do work at the Center School pumps and boilers for over $13,700. Now, we do budget in our facilities expenses for unforeseen situations that arise, but basically this was sort of an extraordinary year, and I can tell you in the budget that we'll be bringing to you later on at town meeting, we have upped the funding some more, again recognizing that our buildings are aging. As we know, we have 26 buildings in the community. The last new buildings, obviously was the fire station that we just opened a few months ago, but again, all of our school buildings are over 40 years old, which is a significant amount of our capital stock, and again, we have libraries and fire stations and so forth. On the line item 13 regarding community services, personnel services, that's a transfer. For care of this building, we are going away with we've ended our relationship with the Housing Authority for shared maintenance services under a contract, and we have a part-time employee. So we're basically taking the $5,400 and moving it from the salary account from the expense account, moving it into the salary account. And then lastly, the last item is line item 14, community services expenses, $50,000, and that's for veterans benefits. The Veteran Services Office has been quite busy. Regina Jackson does a tremendous job there, and she's just had a large caseload. Fortunately, we get reimbursed by the state for 75% of these expenses, but they come a year later in the state's funding formula. So we have to bear the cost up front, and then we'll receive it. And then as you'll see, again, when we go into the operating budget, we foresee this condition continuing in the new year, and we've increased her budget accordingly. So, Mr. Moderator, that concludes my presentation under this article.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Now is the time for question and answers. If anyone has any questions about this particular warrant article? Yes.
Mr. Moderator, Bob Joyce, 103 Turnpike Road, Precinct 1. A question to the manager. Where I see that all these things need to be increased, but I guess I don't see where they're all coming from. What's the source of the funds?
As listed in the motion, Mr. Moderator, the source of fundings is we are transferring $187,500 from the Finance Committee Reserve Fund, $20,497 from the insurance recovery funds, and $5,400 from budget line item number 14, community services expenses.
Okay, I just didn't flip the page, I guess. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? There being none, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee unanimously recommends this for approval.
Do the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Now is the time for discussion. Anyone have any comments or discussion? There being none, we'll get the screen up for the vote. A yes vote means that you're in favor of this funding. No means you're opposed. An abstention means you don't understand it.
That's good.
So the vote was 136 yes, 1 no. The article passes. No
Mr.
abstentions.
Moderator, I move to waive the reading of all warrant articles.
I have a motion to waive the reading of all warrant articles. Any comment, discussion? All those in favor, please raise your tabs. Opposed? Passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 3 is the payment of prior fiscal year bills. We're seeking an amount that totals $8,522 for bills incurred by the School Department and Facilities Department in fiscal year 2014, for which there was a sufficient appropriation at the time the bills were submitted. And they're listed in your handout, and they're listed here on the overhead. And I'll briefly go through them for your edification. As you can see, the items are listed by the invoice date, the vendor, and the amount. The first one was an invoice back in September of 2013 for the Collaborative for Educational Services. This pertained in the amount of $504, and it pertained to 35 education evaluator booklets. The next two from Lilia DeAngelis, which total $168 for work that was done in March and April of 2004. This is a student who worked at the Chelmsford High School Performing Arts Center. And as occasionally the case, the student neglected to get her payroll submission to paperwork in order to be paid for her work there. But then shows up a few months ago and then is looking to finally get paid. So again, it was legitimate work. We have the invoices. We're seeking your approval because it's the prior year bill to make payment. The next three, the direct energy Hess and Hess bills, pertain to natural gas service delivered to the Byam School. The next one is Integrity by Kelt, is a school technology invoice pertaining to software services and web wires and so forth. And then the last one in the school domain is the Musician's Friend. This was a airlift stadium harness for bass drum, in which there were three of them. So it was all about the bass, apparently, so they didn't get the bills in. And then the last invoice was for ServPro from Leominster. This was a facilities bill, and this pertained to water extraction and dehumidification from carpeted floors at the school administration as a result of a roof leak. The work was contracted by facilities. The work was performed at the school administrative office building. The invoice didn't get sent to facilities. It got sent to the location area and fell through the cracks. And so basically that's the summary of the activities we have, and we respect your payment for these, authorization for these payments. As you can see by the listing, these are all legitimate goods and services that were procured by the town. And as you know from the long discussion we had back in November, the school committee has put in place new guidelines and watching POs to prevent such occurrences from happening in the future. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Now is the time for questions and answers, and I would just like some clarification. Mr. Manager, since there were available funds at the time the bills were submitted, this would be a simple majority vote?
Yes.
Okay. So are there anyone else who has questions? There being none, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends unanimously to approve this article.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
The Board of Selectmen unanimously recommend approval.
Okay, now's the opportunity for people to have discussion on this warrant article. Apparently there is none. So this, again, is a simple majority vote, and we'll have the screen up momentarily. Or not? There we go, 33 seconds left. There you go. So it looks like it's 134 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstention, so the article passes. Thank you. Article 4, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 4 is the Neshoba Valley Technical School District FY16 assessment. Now, for the second consecutive year, we have placed this as a separate article on the warrant for the town meeting. Remember, with the Neshoba Tech being a regional school district, the decision by the town meeting is to approve the assessment or not to approve the assessment. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Jean Savoy, who is going to present regarding the school district this evening.
Am I clicking away? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us tonight. I bring with me this evening Gabriella White, our Director of Curriculum, and our school committee member, Dawn Ayer. We also have another school committee member in the audience, Mr. Sam Poulton. And we also have Maria Carafellis here this evening. Our presentation, thank you. Our presentation begins with the former Secretary of Labor, Robert Reich. He likes to point out that college is not the only gateway to a middle-class life in the world today as we know it. Go ahead and put the next slide. He says a degree isn't necessary for a lot of the nation's good jobs that pay well. having a technical background and suggests that vocational technical education is a viable alternative to a four-year college degree, and you can earn approximately the same amount of money. This is just some statistics from Neshoba, and you can see we have good dropout rates, and we are doing well with our MCAS, and we have 10 advanced placement classes, and we have theater arts, music, language, dance, and our beautiful new art and dance studio. And just some statistics about Neshoba. This slide's kind of self-explanatory. The next slide is you can see we've grown tremendously. We've grown almost 60% in the last 10 years. Here is the slide showing it. As you can see, a lot of our member towns are decreasing. Westford's holding its own, and we are growing at a phenomenal rate compared to our towns. This is the last year's. I think the next slide shows this better. And you can see here that this is our per pupil. This is per pupil for our towns and for ourselves. And you can see that our towns have a very high per pupil growth, and while we are struggling to meet 10% with our growth rate of almost 60%. This is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education slide showing on one side the percentage of foundation and the percentage of net school spending. This shows also better in the bar graph, I believe. As you can see, our member towns are well above net school spending, and we are below by a smidge. We'd like to point out we're the lowest cost technical high school. It's just our formula slides that we get directly from the state website. And the next couple of slides are related to Chelmsford and how they determine your foundation and your enrollment and your costs. All right, so this, the next slide's just the actual assessment, and then shows the number of students from Neshoba from Chelmsford, and the number of students at Chelmsford. And you can see that, let's just go back for half a second to that slide. You can see that the dollar amount that's assessed for the students in Chelmsford are divided between the two schools, ours and the Chelmsford schools, and the fact that your enrollment's going down and our enrollment goes up kind of gives us an advantage in the percentage. And this is some of the great things we've done over the past year. In the past 10 years, we've contributed almost $17 million of our district funds towards our budget, above and beyond what we receive from our towns. This is our budget for this year, showing an increase of 7%. That's our capital projects, our 5-year capital plan, which we bring every year to the towns. This is our assessment sheet for our towns. As you can see, we have this year 185 students, an increase from last year of 12 students. Of the 185, we actually currently today have 179 students, and 11 of those students are post-grad students. That's it. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, it is time for question and answers if anyone does have any. Yes? It's a point of order? Okay, do you want her to repeat her entire presentation?
Is this better? Okay.
Okay. We have some questions.
Karen DiDonato, 4 Archibald Way. In the 2015 budgeted amount, can you tell me how much the line item is for the total compensation package for the superintendent and the principal?
I don't have the 2015 budget with me.
No, the 16 budget that you're presenting, I'm sorry. What is the amount budgeted for the superintendent and the principal?
I did not bring the detail of the budget with me. And I want to, yeah, 196, I think is her I want to say 196,000 for the superintendent. And the principal, I think, just got an increase. I want to say it's 120.
120,000 and
I believe that's correct.
196,000? Okay.
Yes.
And that's for one school
That's correct.
of approximately
Yes.
704
The
students?
superintendent has been there for 20 years, and the principal's been for over 10.
How much money is in your stabilization fund right now?
Stabilization fund, and this is at the end of February. The treasurer hasn't come in, and he brings one of the the bank books with him, so I don't have that. But currently, as of the end of February, $662,946, and that includes the interest that's been collected, because that account can keep its interest.
Okay, thank you. And as far as the budget, the 16 budget you're proposing, does that include hiring any new staff, adding any new programs, or building any new facilities?
It includes 2 new instructors, and we are renovating the upholstery shop to be a veterinary clinic, and we are renovating the glass in the greenhouse to try and do sustainable farming in that area.
So does the capital plan that you've proposed for 168,000,
I do believe it covers some of the costs of those programs.
which is a new clinic for veterinary?
We're fixing the veterinary. We're fixing the upholstery clinic that's been emptied out. We haven't had upholstery for several years, and that we're hoping that we can use the things that are on the roof currently and not have to do too much renovation all at one time.
So I have a question about postgraduates.
Yes.
At the FinCom meeting a couple of weeks ago, can you tell me, out of the 704, how many of those are postgraduates that we're paying for students who've already graduated from high school, but they get free tuition, correct?
There are 26 postgraduates currently.
So 26 postgraduates, and approximately how much does it cost to educate them?
What we do with the postgrads, if there's an available seat in a classroom, they take the seat. Actually, they're only in the technical area, so they take the spot in the technical area if there's an opening in the
No,
technical
I
area.
asked for the amount, the cost. What is the
It
cost?
would be the same as any other student.
So I think we're up at $16,000.
For 1 year. It's
For
at the
1
base
year.
rate- It's the base rate we get from the state, which I think is actually going to be closer to 13.
So even, let's just say 10.
It doesn't include transportation. It does not include special ed, and they don't take the academic classes. They're only in the technical area, and they're usually there only for 1 year.
So even if we just took a number of 10,000 for 26 students, we're paying $10,000 per student for a student to attend postgraduate after they've already graduated from high school.
I think that it's important for you to know that the typical student that we get...
No, is that yes or no? I'm just...
Well, we'll let
You're
her
not
answer the
paying-
question.
You're not paying all of that cost. Obviously, the state pays their portion of that cost as well.
Okay.
And you get the money there's a Chapter 74 program. It comes through the state funding, comes right through, from the state.
And how much is in the school choice account?
The school choice account is almost approximately $3 million.
Okay. And this year, you're looking for 400,000 over minimum?
I believe that's the case.
And are you proposing 200,000 to stabilization?
We are.
Thank you.
Kathy Tuberty, Precinct 1.
Yes.
Stabilization Fund.
Yes.
Who decides how that money is spent?
The stabilization fund was set in place by the school committee in case we had a major emergency that obviously we have a hard time getting our budget passed in a couple of our member towns, and we need approval for all 8 towns. If, say, the roof collapsed, we needed a new boiler or anything like that. So we are aiming to have $1 million in that account to protect us from major building expenses.
So, I'm sorry, I missed it. Who approves spending that money?
The school committee. It's under the purview of the school committee.
And where is that documented? Because I know, for our stabilization fund, the school committee doesn't authorize it, the finance committee doesn't authorize it, the selectmen don't authorize it, the town manager doesn't authorize it. It has to come back to the town to authorize it.
Well, in a technical high school, the school committee is our board. They are our higher power. Mr. Ayer?
Hi, John Ayer. I'm on the committee. Are you asking how it was created?
Yeah, I guess how it was created, who approved the
It was
process?
created as a request of this body and the other 8 towns, and it was approved by a vote. And our commitment was to put 200,000 into that with the hopes of getting to $1 million. We are at 6 something with the interest. Any interest earned stays in it. It's just like you have a stabilization for the town and our school. But in our case, as a district, if we had an emergency, if we blew a boiler, the big boiler, we would have to go to 8 towns and ask for the money to fix it. In this case, we would have the stabilization fund there, and the school committee of 14 members from 8 towns would have to vote to take it out to use it for that expense.
Ms. Tuberty, town council actually has the statutory authority.
Okay.
So,
Does that answer your question?
Well, it might. Let's see what he has to say, and then.
Mr. Moderator, the statute is General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 16G and a half, and it says that the funds can be expended by a 2/3 vote of the Regional School District Committee. It can be expended for any purpose for which the district is authorized to borrow, or any other purpose as the Director of Accounts may approve. So that means the Department of Revenue. If the school committee wants to use it for something other than a purpose for which they can borrow, they need approval from the Department of Revenue.
Thank you. Have you used any of that money yet?
No.
Okay. And then my last question is, along with Karen, was about the graduated students that you have there. Do other tech schools charge for their students, or
If they're a post-secondary school, yes. We are a post-grad. So that would be a no. Why don't we have Ms. White give you some information regarding the postgrad?
Thank you.
She knows what the application process is and so forth.
Hello. There's a difference between a postgraduate program and a post-secondary program. The way that the regulations for Chapter 74 in regional technical high schools were set up, they are actually set up to be grades 9 through 14. So a postgraduate student takes the space in a program of an available space in a currently set up technical program. Post-secondary programs are completely different. They require separate approval from the Department of Education. They require a separate teacher, separate space in the building, or that the space is utilized at a different time of the day from the regular 9 through 14 program. We do not have any post-secondary programs. The other regional technical schools do, and they charge for post-secondary. Then they charge post-grads if they take them from out of district. They don't charge the district students. They charge post-secondary. For example, an LPN program. Minuteman has an LPN program. They charge the students to go into that program. They're turning their cosmetology program into a post-secondary program to be done primarily at night, I believe. They will be charging them for that. For the postgraduate, that money is considered to be the same as the 9 through 12 students because it is set up in the regulations as 9 through 14.
Okay. Do you know of any other tech schools around?
I am not aware of any tech schools that charge for the postgraduate in-district students. Post-secondary, yes. Postgraduate, no.
My question was going to be, do you know of anybody around us that has postgraduate students, or are they all post-secondary students?
There are, even Minuteman have postgraduate students. That's the big one that people talk about a lot, and they have postgraduate. They don't charge in district, they charge out of district, they charge post-secondary.
All right, thank you.
Janet Dubner, Precinct 6. The number of Chelmsford students is the October 1st number, 185?
That's correct.
Is that still the number of Chelmsford students in
No.
residence?
As of the Friday before school vacation, we were at 179 students.
Okay, thank you.
Karen DiDonato for Archambault Way. Can we charge for postgraduate students?
We have no interest, it's sort of double dipping. We're getting the money from the state. If we got that money, we'd probably have to apply it specifically to those students, which obviously would be difficult to do if they're in a regular classroom with other students. If there's one, no, so it's not going to happen. Our school committee wouldn't, it's double dipping, basically.
So we can charge, but the school committee has voted not to?
No, they have not voted.
Oh.
We could not use the money for, our school is a K, no, we're 9 to 14, as opposed to a regular high school that's 9 to 12. We actually can go to grade 14. That's part of the Chapter 74 statute.
My other question is for FinCom, and it's a two-part question, and I would like to address it to each one of the FinCom members. At your April 2nd meeting, you voted 5-2 to approve the budget for Neshoba Valley Tech. My first question is, do you think that Chelmsford is in a financial position to fund approximately $53,000 to Neshoba to put in a stabilization fund, $17,680 in additional capital that they've requested this year, and approximately $77,000 that funds our 11 postgraduate students, and that's a rough number because I couldn't get an exact number, for a total of $147,680. Do you think that Chelmsford is in a financial position to be able to fund that additional $147,000 when we are taking money out of our own stabilization fund?
Okay, now, Mr. Donato,
Yep.
you're arguing.
Oh.
Okay, you asked a question, let them answer.
Okay.
Mr. Nato, you and I have exchanged emails this whole weekend. The Finance Committee voted 5-2, a majority, to recommend this particular article. That meant that 5 of the members, myself was one of them, voted for it. If you want to speak to the 2 dissenters, you're more than welcome to. If you want to speak to the others, you're more than welcome to also, but I think it's a waste of time.
That's fine. Do you need me to repeat my question?
No, I don't.
You suggested that I ask it at town meeting this evening, so that's why I'm here.
Okay, now, just question and answer.
I asked the question.
He
Sheila?
answered it.
No, I asked each one of the FinCom members to answer the first question, and then I want to know their rationale for
Okay, then I
why they voted.
misunderstood because I thought you were just asking the board as a
No.
general board.
No, I'm sorry. I said I wanted to ask each individual FinCom member if they feel that Chelmsford's in a financial position.
We know what the question is.
Oh, okay.
In regard to the stabilization fund, I voted for this, and the reason why I voted for this is that this issue was addressed very late in the budget process. If we vote this budget down now, we are not assured as to how many of the other communities involved would vote in the same manner. Therefore, I believe that a negative vote would create a problematic situation for the discussion in the future. Now, this issue will definitely be more thoroughly addressed in the formation of the next year's budget. And I really do believe that we need to ensure the best possible communication with all parties involved in order for a positive change to occur. I think this will happen next year, Karen. I think that stabilization will definitely be looked at more, be scrutinized a lot more. So I really don't believe that creating a more problematic situation now, which I believe this would lend itself to a positive change in the future, and that's my personal belief.
Sheila, that's your rationale, part 2 of the
I'm sorry,
question.
this is
I had two
question and
questions.
answer. You've asked the question, let the various...
I had 2 questions that I asked
Well,
each
let
one.
every FinCom member answer the first question first.
Then go back. Okay.
And I will agree with Sheila as well, and this is the reason why I voted for that allocation. And I think going forward, we have established a different formula as how we will be communicating with Neshoba.
I think I've thoroughly discussed this both at the budget review hearing with Neshoba Valley and also when we voted. I gave my rationale and explanation as to why I voted the way I did, but I'll do it again. If we look at what they're requesting, it's actually less of an increase in the request from the previous fiscal year to this fiscal year. What you look at as far as the numbers themselves, their total budget request is around $13,357,704 for the entire district. It looks like a 9.7% increase, but it's not, because we have an increase in the amount of students that we're having attend Neshoba Valley this year. We've gone from 173 to 185. If you break down the numbers, it's going to be an increase from $14,848.62 per student for the entire budget to $15,232.69. That's a $384.07 increase for a 2.59% increase in the budget, which well along the line of all the other departments in the town for their increase in their percentage for this year. If you look at the actual increase, and you talk about the stabilization fund itself. Stabilization fund is controlled, as Town Council mentioned, by Chapter 71, 16G 1.5, and they are allotted and allowed to transfer over 5% from the aggregate amount apportioned from the members of municipalities from the preceding fiscal year. Now, the preceding fiscal year was $8,116,088. That 5% of that is $405,804.40. They're requesting $200,000 from the entire district. Our percentage, our amount is not 53, it's actually 52,560 based upon our percentage that we're allotted. Now, if you look at that again, and you say, okay, Shirley and Pepperell have, because they have an increase in population, increased their assessments, they're looking potentially to have money returned back from the stabilization fund allotment. Well, if that did come back, and that's not including the excess deficiency, which actually was certified recently, and some may be coming back from the assessment, and we may be reducing this number anyway. But if you look at that, and you kick the whole $200,000 back, we get $52,560 back. That's our proportion because we have the largest amount of students going to the school. If you kick that back, their increase in their budget this year will be 0.67%. I'm looking at this and saying, why are we yelling and why are we screaming, why are we complaining about this? My rationale for this was quite simply, we have 185 students from Chelmsford students, going to Neshoba Valley Technical High School. And I think it sends a poor message to say that they're asking for a 2.59% increase in their budget, that we're not going to allow and support that. And that's why I voted my way.
Thank you.
First of all, I support with the other three towns that are looking to have that stabilization amount reduced. But let me say, I did not support the Neshoba budget and assessment since they would not provide students and financial information to make an informed decision. For example, the following information that was requested, which I think is necessary to review and approve the budget, was not provided. The student enrollment, for example, by grade level from October 1st, for October 1st and the present. So I was not able to get that grade level student enrollment. The end of the year report was not provided. Non-budgeted expenditure, they have lots of money, and we were not able to get the information as how much money was spent from non-budgeted areas. Try to get the detailed administrative costs, not available. Investments, there's another area that we weren't able to get. Quarterly cash reports. Keep in mind, this is not a school system like Chelmsford. They're like a little mini town. Trust funds, federal and state grants, revolving accounts, and the postgraduates, which is a cost factor there. You're paying the per pupil costs. They also required that the town of Chelmsford pay $300 for the requested financial information. That's the reason, basically, is that they didn't provide the right information to make a decision whether to support the budget or not.
Thank you. The reason I voted no was primarily regarding the stabilization issue. We had our review meeting on Tuesday, and it was a tough meeting. Yes, I was very vocal, but there was information passed back and forth, and they were having a budget subcommittee meeting on the following day, a Wednesday. We, as members of the Finance Committee and other officials, had been contacted by the town administrator of Shirley, who also was having concerns about the stabilization. Their finance committee meeting, team had already met, and it was the topic of stabilization, of having them, in this case, not move the $200,000 to stabilization. Not affecting the expenditures on the students, but just not to put $200,000 into their stabilization fund. Because the town of Shirley and all indications were Pepperell and Air and Townsend all were concerned about this amount of money, and that's the focus point, was the $200,000. I attended the budget subcommittee meeting on the Wednesday evening, and the members of the finance subcommittee meeting, the Neshoba school committee members, of which Maria Carafellis was there and is our member, they discussed this issue. The administrator of Shirley spoke to them, as did people from Pepperell, and myself and Mr. Gilroy were present, as was the town manager. Pardon me? Yeah, I'm sorry, you spoke as well. So we all were there advocating in unison with our fellow communities. They said at that meeting that they thought that was important enough to bring back to their complete school committee meeting of April 14th. So we left feeling that that issue of the stabilization was going to be discussed on their April 14th meeting. I felt, when I decided that if they moved the money to stabilization, I was going to vote in favor of it. At our finance committee meeting, I wanted to postpone our vote because I felt that it would give us more leverage with the full school committee of Neshoba to say that our vote was uncertain, so they would perhaps consider not moving the money to stabilization. And I also felt that it was support of our fellow communities. Because of these communities, 4 of them are also taking money out of their stabilization account, and they feel that it's putting them in a very tenuable position. In fact, employees from these other towns might lose their jobs. I wanted to be in support of the other communities. I want to support Neshoba in their efforts to educate our students, but I feel that the town of Chelmsford is taking $500,000 out of its stabilization account. 4 other communities are also, or a total of 4, are also having to take money out of stabilization accounts to meet their budget needs. And I feel that because you need a 2/3 vote from the various towns at town meeting to make any substantial change to the budget, I felt it was important to support our fellow community in sending member districts. So that's why I voted no, because I wanted to delay the vote. I wanted to make it most, put us in the position most likely to get them to vote to not move $200,000 to stabilization. So I also went, as did Tom, to the April 14th school committee meeting, and Pepperell was there. Shirley, town administrator, was there and spoke eloquently. Anyways, the Neshoba board, even though we had assurances that it was going to be discussed, tabled the discussion till later, till after all the town meetings. So effectively, they're not going to decide this issue until a meeting in May. May what? 7th. May 7th. So one thing I would like to say is we have 3 members from Chelmsford on this committee, and there are 18 members, or 17 members. So we would need 9 votes to get them not to move the money to stabilization. So I'm sure our 3 members from Chelmsford will vote the way that citizens want them to vote. We have no effect on the other members. I do believe it would be nice if Chelmsford only had to take $450,000 out of our savings account, $450,000 versus the $500,000. But my vote no is because I want to support our fellow communities, and I want them not to take the money out of stabilization to offset our assessments.
Okay, Mr. Donato, you had another question?
Oh, yes.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
may I put some information out? And
There has not been a question posed to you yet, if there is one, or you can certainly speak during debate.
Thank you.
My second question is whether you feel the town of Chelmsford can afford the, let's just say, $70,000 in, if that's our portion of stabilization and our portion of the additional capital they're requesting. Do you think that Chelmsford this year in our budget can afford to expend that 70 to the Neshoba Valley budget? And that's addressed to each one of them.
Ms. Donato, I feel that that question is redundant.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. You've asked the same question twice in two different ways, but you're asking whether or not Chelmsford can afford something, and the Board of Selectmen have responded that
Finance Committee.
5 of them say that we can, and 2 have said that we can't, or at least that they've indicated that they oppose the funding, and at least voted in such a way. Okay, Karen?
Okay, then I'll assume they think we can afford it. Thank you.
Tom Newcomb, Precinct 9. Mr. Moderator, through you to the presenter, I have a couple of quick questions that I hope are quick. Just trying to clarify things. My eyes and ears are getting old and the print is real small. Just want to, I believe you said that there was a 7% increase in your budget this year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, but because I'm looking at the slide that's on the screen, I'm looking at the printout here, and I'm looking at last year as being $8,116,008.
Yeah, this is the assessment side. On the funding side, when we actually build the budget is built with the revenue side, and the money that's not there is money that the district will put in from either school choice or excess and deficiency to meet the budget. So the town's assessments are only a portion of the budget. We have to cover the rest. As I said in the previous slide, in the last 10 years, we've had to put $17 million of district funds in to make up the difference in the budget from the assessments from our town and what we need to support the students.
Am I understanding this correctly, that you're actually looking at a 10% increase in the assessment over last year?
The assessments, as you can see, are based on the money that comes in from the town. The minimum assessments have increased because in a lot of our member towns, their district enrollment has gone down while ours has increased. So when they take the money from the state and apportion it between the two, we have a bit better advantage because we're increasing.
No, I understand, but you're not answering the question. I asked if the assessment for last year was 8.1 million and this year is 8.9 million. That's 10%. Am I correct that that's a 10% increase in assessment?
Yes, but most of that, as you can
Yes,
see,
thank
come
you.
through
That
the
was my
minimum
question.
contribution
Thank
that
you.
you're forced
But-
to pay by law.
Okay, so we have a 10% increase in the assessment. You also mentioned that there are other district funds
Yes,
that come in, and you mentioned the excess and deficiency.
that's correct.
Am I correct in my understanding that when you put this budget together, you anticipated about $500,000 of E&D, and when you were certified by the DOR, actually was $700,000, in
That's
excess of
correct.
$700,000.
That's correct.
So you have an extra $200,000. Am I correct that you have an extra $200,000?
know that it's an extra $200,000.
Yeah,
something
that, first of all, that's not an appropriate question, but I'll let you answer, I'll let you.
Mr. Moderator, I'm just trying to, as I said before, I'm asking clarifying questions to make sure
Right,
that I have the
but your
correct
question is misleading, because the excess deficiency goes back to the cities and towns. It doesn't, it's not 200,000, whatever the number is, 2%.
We can hold on to 5%. Anything above a 5%.
Are you debating this, Mr.
comes back-
Moderator?
No, I'm just trying to indicate why I think your
Okay.
question, the way that you phrased it, was
The
inappropriate.
question was to the presenter, not to you.
No, it's actually through me, Mr. Newcomb. Okay? So if I rule the question's inappropriate, I was going to let her answer, and I think she was going to explain that the excess and deficiency is not retained by the school. It goes back to the various cities and towns.
I was simply asking what the figure was.
No, you started to ask if they were retaining 2% more.
I did not ask that. I'm done.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Okay. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee voted a majority to approve this article.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Does the Board of Selectmen unanimously recommend approval?
Okay. This is a time for discussion on the issue.
Mr. Moderator, if I may, I'd like to give a little history on this.
Mr. Ayers, You have to wait in line. You're part of the presenters, so you have to actually get in line with all the other presenters. Questions and answers.
Can I let him cut in line?
Well, that's
I
your
don't
call. I mean, if the people behind you don't have a problem, I don't have a problem.
You mind? Yes. Okay, then I'll go. Dawn, you're gonna have to get in the back. Maria Carafellis, Precinct 2, also a school committee member and a budget subcommittee member at Neshoba Tech. The budget subcommittee meeting that we had for the month of April, the towns of Shirley, Pepperell, Chelmsford, and Air came to talk to the budget subcommittee regarding our $200,000 into our stabilization fund, which was approved by this body and the other 7 sending towns for us to have. And it was discussed at that time that Dr. Klemkowitz and the business manager would use the funding, our own funding, to put into the stabilization fund for as long as we could without going to the sending towns. This is what Neshoba is doing. They have a goal. Neshoba is a unit within itself. They're their own municipality. I can't tell you, you can't go from the school committee and go to the town manager and say, hey, I need help. We don't have that. We don't have that luxury. And as far as I'm concerned, the meeting, the budget subcommittee meeting, the vote that we took at the budget subcommittee meeting was not to make a decision on the $200,000 going into the stabilization fund as a budget subcommittee, that we were going to bring it to our full school committee. And that would be a discussion that we would be having. And then the school committee would make the decision along with the recommendations from the budget subcommittee. And my vote, and I will tell you my vote was that we appropriate the $200,000 into our stabilization fund, because those are your kids, those are my kids, those are everybody's kids in this room. And if you turn around and you're trying to take money away from Neshoba, you're taking it away from your own kids.
Karen DiDonato for Archambault. Could I just get clarification? I think town meeting voted to create the stabilization fund, not to have to put $200,000 in a year. Can someone clarify that?
No, you're correct.
Okay, so
The
Okay.
funding was to be determined on a year-to-year basis, as I recall.
whether it could be afforded or not. Okay. Just to understand the process, what we're doing here, or what you're doing here, because I don't get to vote, I get to go home and watch this on TV. What you're doing here is you're voting this budget up or down. If you approve it, then basically, and all the other towns approve it, then Neshoba can go and expend the money. If you do not approve it, and we cannot talk line items, we just vote it up or you vote it down. If you vote it down, you're basically telling Neshoba, or asking them, requesting them to go back to their budget committee and relook at their budget. And that is what those 4 towns did when they went to the budget subcommittee. The budget subcommittee delayed basically they put off their request and took it to their full school committee. The full school committee tabled it. They refused to address it when they had plenty of time to address it before any of our town meetings. So they could have come back to us with an answer, but instead, they tabled it. And they've tabled it to a meeting that's after all of our town meetings. So if we vote this up, then they don't have to go back and address it. If you vote it down, and all the other towns vote it down, all you're doing is asking Neshoba to go back and relook at their budget. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Because I don't think the town of Chelmsford can afford the additional $53,000 to put into their stabilization fund. They already have $650,000. And those funds are set up that when you have additional funds, you put it in there. But I don't believe Neshoba has the additional funds to put it in. They're asking for $400,000 over minimum. And yes, our numbers have increased. But if you look at the spreadsheets, your required minimum covers any increase in your students. So we're already paying for that increase out of our required minimum. So they're asking for 400,000 more, of which 200 they want to put in a savings account. And what I'm asking is, vote it down so that 200,000 will come back to the towns, and we'll get 53,000 back, which could potentially reduce the money we're taking in and out of stabilization. Hopefully you'll vote this down and send it back to the Budget Committee at Neshoba.
Deep breath. Claire Janot, Precinct 7. I'm here to defend the Neshoba budget. And I have the following things that I hope you'll consider when you vote on this budget this evening. The first and the last and the one in the middle is that this fight at this town meeting has gone on too long and become far too much of an embarrassment to anybody who really cares about the school and the way they run it. I think it's a personal issue that some faction of people have against people at Neshoba, namely the superintendent. Maybe others, I don't know. That said, and get it out there in the air, I'm here to say that we have a stabilization fund in our town, and in the Finance Committee's book this evening, it says that at fiscal 15, 7.1% of our operating budget is in that account. And at the end of fiscal 16, it should be 7.4%. If you take the $850,000 that should be funded in the Neshoba Stabilization Fund by the end of fiscal 15, add the $200 they're asking for in this budget, and whatever de minimis interest they're getting on it, they're going to have a little over $1 million, $1,050,000. That divided by their $13,157,000 budget is going to put them at 7.9%, right where we are. Now, somewhere between 5 and 10% is the guideline we use in Chelmsford as what we think is the appropriate amount to have in our rainy day fund. I absolutely agree that they cannot just go to town meeting in April or in October or to a Finance Committee reserve fund to get something when they have something important occur that needs to be funded outside of their spring town meetings. And they need to go to not now 7 towns, but 8 to get approval. I want them to have this reserve fund. I think it's prudent. Secondly, I don't know how anybody, the prior speaker, can stand here and say this $53,000 that would come back to us if our 26% of $200,000 is money that we need. And we're not questioning whether we should fund OPEB at $1 million or, I mean, we make a lot of choices when we decide how to allocate the revenues that are available to this community. And to pick one thing out as a cherry picker and say this is what should come back, and ask us to join in with a fight because other people in other communities have particular fiscal pressures, is asking me as a town meeting member to stand here and do not what I think is best for the students of this community that have a choice on where they go to school, but asking me to do other people's business in Pepperell and Shirley and every place else. That's not why I'm here. The third thing is, I just want to point out that the excess and deficiency really should not get confused. It will by statute be returned, and I am hopeful that one of the school committee members that do represent us is going to explain how that money comes back in the fall to the town of Chelmsford and the other towns based on their percentages. I please urge you to consider voting for this, and I especially urge that we put this fight behind us.
Donald Ayer, and I'm a member of the Neshoba Board. I want to do a little history lesson. We're required by law to come up with a final budget 45 days before the first town has this town meeting.
Can you speak into the microphone?
And that was Westford. So on 3/5, on March 5, we came up with the budget. It was certified with DOR, right? And it went out. Well, and then we had a public hearing. No one came. All of this information about this $200,000 came out after Westford had already voted in the affirmative. You're asking, we said, fine, we'll talk about it next year. But you're trying to take a budget that's already been voted, by 8 towns and start gerrymandering it all around. If you were there when we were putting it together, it would have been a heck of a discussion. But to come in the back door after, you missed the boat, guys. You missed the boat. And I recommend that you vote this budget because it's the best thing for our kids at Neshoba. Thank you.
Sam Polton, Precinct 8, also a member with Mr. Ayer of the Neshoba School Committee. I think that the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, in recommending the budget, I think speak far more eloquently than I can. And I thank you for that recommendation. I just want to clarify something that was a direct question, and I want to answer it as one of Chelmsford's representatives. And that is, after the discussion, why wasn't a vote taken at the school committee meeting? Why was it delayed and all this? I first want to assure the town meeting that this will not be taken up next year. As the maker of the motion, I did not move that we table the discussion about the stabilization fund. I asked that it be agended at the very next school committee meeting. Those were my words. That's what the minutes say. So the first thing I want to do is clarify. I heard 2 people tell this body that the Neshoba School Committee ignored the request and rather than deal with it, tabled the discussion. Not correct. I made the motion. I moved that we discuss the issue at the next school committee meeting in May. And I think you can imagine how the Chelmsford representatives will lobby with our colleagues. So please be assured that the matter is not being ignored. Second, the amount in the stabilization fund was not certified until the morning of the school committee meeting, and not for lack of our trying. At numerous school committee meetings after the first of the year, we voted to contact the Department of Ed and ask, why aren't we certified? Why isn't our E&D certified? It got certified that day, and we didn't really know what the exact amount was. So once again, it was not any shell game, razzle-dazzle, or anything else. We were not equipped to vote. We now are. And our meetings are open, our votes are public, and I certainly encourage as many people who wish to come to the school committee meeting. Our record has been to return the excess money to the towns, including Chelmsford. We've done that in the past, and it's our intention to do our part in the present and in the future. I thank the 2 boards, and I would sincerely ask that town meeting endorse this assessment and vote the number that's been presented to you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator, Tom Fall, Precinct 5, I move the question.
Motion, move the question. Okay, so now there can be debate on, no debate. Okay, so we'll just take a vote. We need a 2/3 vote. A vote in favor means that we will then vote on the warrant article. A vote opposed means that debate will continue. Okay, you have 35 seconds.
What? I don't vote. I don't have a clicker. Oh, it's up here. Let's go see what's happening.
So the vote was yes 104, no 32, one abstention. So the question has been moved. We will now vote on the warrant article itself. Okay, you have 35 seconds.
Kelly Beatty for Chelmsford Telemedia. As Claire Janot pointed out, for various reasons, the Neshoba Valley Technical High School annual assessment and request from the town of Chelmsford has become something of a lightning rod for
And if I can
dissent.
read it correctly,
and,
it's yes 119, no 23, no abstentions. Article passes.
argument. But at least tonight, after considerable debate, the budget
Before we
has
get
been
to the
approved.
next warrant article, if any of you cannot hear a presenter or anyone, please let me know. I can hear everybody. But if you can, I want to know that, okay? So don't be shy. Mr. Moderator?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 5 is an article requesting an appropriation to fund the Chelmsford Public Schools for the upcoming fiscal year. This year, this is new to town meeting. This year, the Board of Selectmen requested that the Chelmsford Public School budget be presented as a separate article for the town meeting's consideration. So with that as introduction, I'll turn the microphone over to Dr. Frank Tiano, our Superintendent of Schools.
Good evening, everyone. Every year at town meeting, we highlight some of our accomplishments to keep you folks informed of what's happening in our district and for you to see where your tax money goes. That's why we load our CTM educational station with programming. We change our website daily and communicate extensively through social media and our listservs. We're quite proud of the work that we're doing in the school district. When you find the time, please turn your attention to the inside of the back cover of the handout we have provided for you up front as you walked in. On the inside back cover, it's in red, you'll see a list of accomplishments for our children and staff in Chelmsford. Please note that that list of accomplishments has been compiled since January. In the budget book, we have quite a detailed explanation of the achievements of our school district from the beginning of the year. When you look at that list from January, when you look at this list currently, and when you look at what happens day to day and the gains that students are making on an everyday basis, we believe this is one of our best years in the classroom over the past 5 years. I believe our students and a majority of our staff and our parents would say the same. So when you get a chance, please, would ask you to take a look at that. Before we talk about the FY16 budget, we wanted to update you on a few items as it relates to that budget. In November, we heard this body request us to find out how the problem occurred and to take steps to ensure that it will never happen again. Our administration has fully embraced that request, and here are a few updates in that regard. Last November, I stood here and highlighted some of the internal changes that happened immediately. That included changing the override feature in our PO system, requiring that all POs needed to be brought through a central person for oversight, and that was our business consultant. We developed processes for encumbering and providing closer scrutiny for our payroll, provided a summary detail on warrants as a more efficient way for them to be read. Our school committee was looking into training regarding their fiduciary responsibilities, and we were reconciling on a monthly basis with the town accountant. And conversations with the town accountant had started regarding combining into one chart of accounts. Since that time, our administration has implemented recommendations by Mr. Sullivan of Melanson and Heath from his audit report last January. And a few of those items include, but not limited to, recategorizing and creating hundreds of line items that accurately reflect our budgeting. On a monthly basis, reviewing and reporting from our Munis system, including our revolving accounts, and presenting them to the school committee from the Munis. We've also been working closely with the town accountant, particularly in the area of separating commingled accounts and combining a chart of accounts. And currently, we have MASBO conducting a procedures audit to help us fine-tune our processes and procedures. I'm sure the school committee and the town offices too can talk about measures that they're taking to ensure that warrants from one fiscal year are not approved and paid in the following fiscal year. That being said, as we share our FY16 budget, please note that the creation of this budget is the most significant financial change for our department this year. This has been a complete team effort spearheaded by Frank Antonelli. When I hired Frank back in the fall, we filled his plate immediately. He immediately completed our end-of-the-year report. He's instituted internal controls. He's worked with the town to create new charts of account. And under his direction, our administrative team developed and implemented an entirely new budgeting process. This endeavor has been hugely successful. We worked with each administrator to create cost centers, essentially by school, to create what was needed. It's quite a comprehensive product. It's been online since January. If you've seen our budget books at our meetings, it has every single line that you could possibly imagine, everybody's salary. All of those lines have been reviewed, some have been recreated, and we've added 100 additional new ones so that they're aligned with what's mandated by the state and for you folks as well. We've received compliments from the school committee and the FinCom for the organization and the level of detail for this budget. And we'd like to thank the school committee and the FinCom for taking the time to work with our administrators, meet with them either individually or collectively to really go deep and understand the cost centers and what it costs to run, for example, the center school, including all the curriculum, all the technology, all the facilities, all the heat and so forth, and really delve deep. Again, for the first time, we have that information from soup to nuts for folks to review. In creating this budget, we had asked our administrators to start with a zero-based budget and asked them to bring us to a level service. We knew we would come in high as we overspent the previous fiscal year. Our preliminary budget was approximately $53 million. Knowing that there's a difference between what we want and what we can afford, the school committee voted on the $52.4 million number that was recommended by the town manager. We'd worked hard to recommend reductions to our preliminary budget from the original 53 to get it down to the 52.4, and the school committee approved those reductions last Thursday. Before I turn it over to Mr. Antonelli, I wanted to provide a few answers to some questions that have been out there. A request from our FinCom chair regarding additional costs of hiring new administrators, being the Director of Business and Finance, a Chelmsford High School principal, a preschool coordinator, a Director of Student Services, and a food service director. I can assure you that the salaries have already been budgeted for these positions, and we are not anticipating going over these amounts. For the food service director, we reduced the budget an additional $25,000 to accommodate that position. Regarding the pending arbitration case with administrators who were laid off last fall, that case is scheduled for October. Should the outcome require funds, the school committee will decide the handling of that financial impact. One possible source for them at that time could be school choice. Thank you for your attention to that matter, and we would turn it right over to Frank Antonelli to walk you through some slides.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me back there? Okay. So I was going to review this first slide, but the superintendent did such an excellent job of doing that that I find very little need to review this slide. He talked about the zero-based budgeting that we have done. We've asked the principals to do that. He mentioned the site management. We've organized the budget into different sites. high school, for example, all of your other schools, technology, etc. We've renamed hundreds of accounts so that it would be clearer for everyone to understand the budget. We've created numerous accounts that are recommended by the Department of Education, but were not used. So by having these accounts now in your budget, you'll be able to legitimately compare expenses in different areas with other communities, either in this area or throughout the entire state. We've itemized all the salaries, as he's mentioned. And in the budget, we have a detailed listing of all of the special education tuition accounts so that we could be very clear what our special education costs were and to make sure that we would encumber those at the very beginning of the school year. This here is a summary of our budget. As you'll recall, this past year, FY15, the original budget was $50 million. At the fall town meeting, the town meeting members generously appropriated an additional $870,447, which gave us that adjusted figure, as you see up there, of $50.8 million. When we got the budgets from the principals and reviewed all the accounts, we developed a budget of $938, excuse me. And that was based on our actual needs. We reviewed that with the school committee. We gave a copy to the town manager. The town manager listened to us. He then received a lot of information from the state regarding cherry sheet estimates, and he told us, I'm sorry, that 53 million may be what everyone thinks they need, but it's not what the town can afford. The town can afford $52,400,000, which is an increase of $1.5 million. So we went back, the administrative staff reviewed our budget, made some recommendations to the school committee, and we cut the difference between the 530118 and the 524. And the 524 is our budget as it stands before you. 75% of this budget relates to obligations that the school district has with its employees. 22% of the budget is for contracted services. Expenses like transportation, special education tuitions, contracted services that we have with different providers, legal services, etc. They amount to 22% of the budget. In addition, the utilities budget is approximately 2%, as well as the supply budget. The supply budget is 2% of the overall $52.4 million budget. You can't read this. I can barely read it from up here. I apologize for the small print, but I want to tell you this. As far as these numbers are concerned, this chart shows the schools. So the first school up there is the Byam School, and it tells you the grade levels on the left-hand side. And over on the right-hand side, it tells you how many students, what the average student class is for each grade. What I want to tell you is that based on this chart right here, the averages are 18 to 24 at the elementary school level. At your intermediate level, you see those down in the bottom third of the chart, the Parker and the McCarthy School. The average class size is between 21 and 25. And at the high school, it is approximately 21 for a class size average. Here's another chart, which is a little bit more you can read this more easily, I think, but some of you may have trouble reading this. We've highlighted a few of the communities. This is the per pupil cost that is published by the Department of Education. The communities that we've highlighted are Billerica. As an example, last year's per pupil cost for Billerica was $14,385. We've highlighted Tewksbury. Last year's cost for Tewksbury was $13,768. And down the bottom, we've highlighted the state. The state average last year was $14,547. You see Chelmsford's up there, the average being $12,437. The only one that I didn't highlight, which I wish I had in hindsight, is Westford. Because Westford, it seems to me, is very close to Chelmsford, not only geographically, budget-wise, school system-wide, the number of students in each community is pretty much the same. So their average last year was $12,526 per pupil, and Chelmsford's again was $12,437. Other significant points in this budget. Student activities, lunch prices, athletic fees, transportation fees will all remain the same next year as they are for this year. There are no changes in those areas. I've tried to give you a brief summary of the budget. The budget, if you've seen it, is very detailed. We would be happy to answer any questions that you have about the budget. I have the budget right here. It may take us a minute in some cases to get to an actual line item if you're concerned about a certain line item. But again, we're happy to answer any questions that you have regarding your FY16 budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tiano and Mr. Antonelli. It segues in perfectly because now it's question and answer time. So if people have questions about the budget,
Tom Newcomb, Precinct 9. Mr. Moderator, through you, the presenter, 2 quick questions. First off, you said with the zero-based budgeting, you really feel you need $53 million. Town manager suggested $52.4, so it's a $600,000 decrease. What programs do you foresee that you're not going to be able to offer because you're not getting the funding that you feel you need? Is that something you can quickly answer, or is it too general of a?
Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker. When we have a reduction of that size, what we try to do is not address programs in general. We try to look at the district from pre-K to 12, so not one entire program is impacted. So we look to make reductions across the entire district. We have a list of reductions that the school committee voted on the other day. I could read them, Mr. Moderator, if that's...
Sure.
It would answer the question.
As long as it's not 5 pages long.
No, it's not 5 pages long. Again, as we had put forth our preliminary budget of $53 million, we reduced $10,000 in athletic uniforms and supplies. We had reduced classroom furniture requests to the tune of $34,000. We had reduced conferences for teachers to the tune of $10,000. And again, that's not the entire budget, but that's a reduction. We had reduced the curriculum adoption by $20,000. Again, not the entire line item for that. We've reduced the ELA coordinator position that was reduced back in the fall, and we've reduced contractual services with RICO, who is our supplier for photocopying and printing, by $70,000. The science coordinator that was reduced in the fall, that position is not brought back. Initially, we had recommended for that position to come back. We've reduced our sub-costs by $169,000, and what we've done there, and the way we've explained this, is we've utilized probably for over 10, 12 years an outside service to manage our substitutes. And as we've explained it in the past, we've, some folks conduct their subs in such a manner that they do it completely in-house. Some folks are in the middle where they use an online service, but they conduct it in-house. And some folks outsource that completely, which we've done for 10, 12 years. We're going from, we want to reduce the management costs there, so we are bringing those services in-house through our personnel department and adding staff to our district to provide coverage.
All right, a second question real quick. You mentioned 75% of your budget goes to basically employee salaries.
Yes.
Do you have an idea as to the breakdown between direct line employees versus administrative employees, and how that compares to previous years? Or is that, if you don't have it readily available, I understand.
I'm just looking over at Mr. Antonelli.
All right, but I'll take my seat.
We have.
Wait for an answer. Thank you.
I'm going to share with you numbers of employees. So in the administration, we had budgeted this year, this current year, 74 administrators. Now we have budgeted 73 administrators. For teachers, K through grades 5 through 8, I'm sorry, my glasses. I didn't read that correctly. That first line, administration, we had budgeted in FY15, and this is in tab 5 of your budget if you have a budget. For administration, we had budgeted 31, and for FY16, we will have the same number, 31. For kindergarten teachers, K through 4, this is where I messed up because I read the wrong line. We had 74.5, and we have budgeted the same amount, 74.5. For teachers 5 through 8, we have 77.6, and we have budgeted 77.8. And for teachers 9 through 12, we have 79.2, and we've budgeted 79.8. We also have special education teachers of 81.2 and for this fiscal year, and teachers of 82.4 for next fiscal year. I don't have the exact dollar figure for you for all of those. I could certainly get that and post that online for you tomorrow if you would like that. Thank you.
Hi, Danielle Evans, Precinct 9. I had a question regarding the cuts that were recently put in place when the board decided not to cut the 2 fifth-grade positions at McCarthy. Am I correct that it's $66,000 of sped costs of a student that moved out of district, and that was a savings that we just had? So my question is, what
Ms. Moderator, the answer is yes to that question.
So my question is, what happens next week when we have another student move in that's, you know, $70,000 or $66,000, and we lose that benefit? And I mean, sped costs, as I think we've all learned this past year, are fluid, and we don't have control over what students are necessarily in our district, when they come in, and how much that's going to cost us to service them. So what happens in September when, you know, there's a combined students that move in and it's $100,000 in increased sped costs? Where are the controls this year for sped costs, and how will that be dealt with? Because that was a major issue that we've been dealing with for this past year. And I just don't see how this...
Mrs. Evans?
Yeah, I know, I'm
You're
sorry.
arguing. Okay,
I'm
just,
sorry. Okay, I will let
you
them
asked a
talk.
good question. Let him ask.
See, there's already...
It's a damn good question. It is fluid. You don't know when they're going to come.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker. As you folks have learned, and as we know quite well, our special education costs are quite fluid. As you heard Frank share earlier, in terms of the encumbering of every single one of our students, we have a better control and encumbering of our students who receive their services outside of our district. In terms of that, we look at students that potentially could be leaving our district next year, as well as working with a 3% increase, looking for situations where students move in. So we take that into account. We have our circuit breaker money as well that provides for those types of situations.
Just one next question. Were there any other cuts, be it in technology or somewhere else, that you could have chosen that was a fixed, known cost that you could have cut instead of something that easily, could turn around again in a few months and be a higher sped cost? I understand the rationale for 3%. I get that, but this is something that we learned. Just like our snow and ice budget, we
Ms.
have
Evans,
no control over.
You've asked the question.
Okay.
We got it.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, in terms of when we make reductions, and we've been doing this since 2008, 2007, I've been in the district 15 years, and this is something as an administration, as a school committee, that we do on an annual basis to look at potential for reductions. So as I mentioned previously, when you look at reductions, you try not to target all in one specific area. You try to spread it out among the entire district. So as we've looked at all of potential areas for reduction, we had made our recommendations to the school committee previously. They had asked us to go back and rework it. To answer your question, did we look at other areas? The answer is yes. Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Debbie Derry, Precinct 6. To begin with, I'd like to thank Mr. Antonelli for all his hard work. And that is how I discovered after a 4-hour school committee meeting that by line budget item that the North Chelmsford Water District.
Ms. Derry, what is your question?
I want to know why is the town of the Chelmsford Water District not charging for the water for the schools as the North Chelmsford Water District is charging for the high school and for the Harrington School? That is my question, and I'd like to know the value.
If the proponents are prepared to answer it, they certainly can, but I'm not sure that, I don't know.
Mr. Moderator, I believe that's a question for the water districts.
Yeah, I would think that it would be.
Well, the reason why I ask is because it's showed by line budget item.
Ms. Derry, the problem is that it's a decision that's made by the water department, not by the schools.
So in other words, the school department is paying the North Chelmsford Water District for the water that they use, and the Chelmsford Water District, which comprises 75% of the town's water, is giving it for nothing.
Ms. Derry, the problem is that we have, if you want to view it as a problem, we have 3 different water districts in town, and they do what they want to do.
Well, I realize that also, but...
So we're voting on a school budget, and they're trying to pay bills.
But that is part of the school budget.
And the budget shows what they're paying for water.
Well, my question is why is...
And what I'm saying is that the answer to the why is that the water districts have to answer that.
Not charging for water when 75% of the town...
Ms. Derry, your question was asked, And the answer is that the school department is not prepared to answer that question. And my suggestion is that if you really want an answer, you contact the water districts.
So we don't know the value of the water that's being given.
We know what they've budgeted, which I'm assuming is what they anticipate the cost to be.
Well, how can that be?
Well, the same way that they know what the cost of electricity is, or how they know the cost of what teachers are.
Well, I guess that's why I'm asking the question.
And
Mr.
they
Moderator.
answered it as best as they could.
But they don't know what the value
No,
of
no,
the
no.
water.
They don't know why certain...
they
Now, Miss
don't
Derry,
know.
Miss Derry, please. They don't know why certain water districts charge and why other water districts don't. That's the answer.
Well, my question was, what is the value of that water?
Miss Derry, there is a line item for water. Am I correct, Mr. Antonelli? There is.
But there's no charge on those other schools. And that's what I was asking.
Yes. Okay, next question.
Jerry Lowe, Precinct 9. I just want to ask a few questions on line items. I see that instructional software is budgeted at $250,000, and the years before, there was no budgeted items for that. I'd like to know what that is.
When we were developing the budget, we found that there were many accounts that were used that should not have been used. And we also found that there were many accounts that should have been used. And so we had to add several, more than several, maybe 100 counts. So when you're going through this budget, unfortunately, sometimes you'll see a line item and there won't be anything budgeted in FY15, but we will have it budgeted in FY16. Bear with us on this budget. It's going to get a lot easier for you, I promise, next year, because you're going to have a history of your actual expenses for FY16, and you'll be able to compare those to FY17.
Okay, just to follow up. So you probably answered this, but I just want to check. There's several line items for FY15 that are not in FY16, so were those ones that were changed, for instance?
Exactly.
Just let me just try one. SLD, professional salaries, $983,000.
Mm-hmm.
That
That's
was
right.
FY15, and FY16 is blank.
Yes. So what happened in a lot of the accounts for salaries, like the one that you just mentioned, is that they were charged overall to a general account, a 00. If you look at the account, it will end in 00. That means that you couldn't tell whether or not those expenses were at the Byam School, the McCarthy School, wherever. So what we did is we took all of those salaries and then we put them into the proper account so that you have a site-based management budget so that you can review and compare costs.
And my last question, and it's probably because I'm remiss in not attending enough school committee meetings and finance committee meetings, I would assume that all of these line items are gone over, but with a fine-tooth comb, both parties, and decided on before it comes to us?
Yes, we will be inquiring as to how they voted on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? There being none, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee has a recommendation. Our vote was 6-1.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
The Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
And does the School Committee have a recommendation?
Yes, the school committee approved the amount of $52,400,000 unanimously.
Okay, now's the time for discussion. There being none, there's being some.
I'll speak. First of all, I'd like to say whoever did this brochure did a great job. But to follow up on it, when you're under a tight budget, how much did the printing of this cost?
Good questions.
I'm looking at the difference. Chelmsford High School under
Okay.
extremely tight budget versus
So,
Neshoba.
can someone answer that question? It's appropriate to ask questions during debate. No, she can answer from any place.
Now that we have the Rico Copy Center, that's just part of our contract with them. So the cost was zero.
But it's built into the cost. I guess for somebody, I don't have kids in the school system, but I always hear people make the comment that, you know, Chelmsford has a lot of extras. And I run my own business, and I know what I get charged per copy. And this is pretty fancy. I guess I'm saying it's perception. Here we are trying to cut budgets, trying to minimize. We're hearing about cutting people's jobs or salaries or whatever. I think it starts from the beginning, and it's perception.
Thank you.
Hi, Danielle Evans, Precinct 9, again. I just want to point out the amount of time that we just questioned Neshoba and the amount of people who are not, I mean, okay, there are people behind me, but I want to point out the amount of time, though, that we questioned this budget that after everything we have been through, I feel is still irresponsible. This is not a responsible budget yet. I think more work needs to be done. A $66,000 cut is from SPED. SPED isn't a fixed operating cost. That it just doesn't count. And I know we have a 3%, but we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's a gamble. That $66,000 is a gamble. And we have no idea if that's going to result in an overage. And I don't think the plan to back that up, if we have higher SPED costs again, it was sufficient. That, given everything we have gone through, I just do not think that's enough. And I do not think, as a body, given what we just asked of Neshoba, that we are scrutinizing this budget enough. I don't feel comfortable voting on this. I don't feel comfortable that I won't be sitting here in October and the school budget won't be asking me for more. I don't think this has been looked at thoroughly. I don't think technology has been looked at enough. I still think there is money left to go there. And I don't think there needs to be another go around on this. I'm sorry, and that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Claire Janot, Precinct 7. I'm supporting this budget. My bet is it's probably not enough money and that the school's been underfunded for a number of years. I certainly wish everybody a lot of luck in managing it next year, since I'm not sure who's doing all the work, but urge the tri-board meetings to continue their good monitoring on a regular basis to make sure as things move that they're detected early and responded to promptly. My question is for the Finance Committee, who voted against it and why?
I abstained. I didn't vote against it, I abstained. And why did I abstain? Well, I have a long speech here, but I'm not going to give it.
Short version, please. I mean, you spend a lot of time in committee meetings and digesting all this information. I'd just like to understand the benefit of your thought.
The short version is that as Dr.
Can you speak in the microphone, sir?
As Dr. Tiano said in his opening statement, we had asked some questions. I personally had asked questions of the school committee and the school administration as to what the additional costs were going to be to the taxpayers for this fiasco that started last fall. And in my opinion, okay, we were met with a lot of arrogance and a lot of irresponsibility. But we didn't get an answer. The answer we got was it's tied up with non-disclosure agreements, penalty clauses, so on and so forth. But the taxpayers of the town still do not know what the cost is going to be. So that was my token vote.
Okay,
to
thank you.
abstain
I
against.
appreciate understanding that. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Frank Tiano, 1 Spruce Street. To answer, it wasn't a direct question, 2 speakers ago regarding the $66,000 from the special education budget. That $66,000 represents a student that was budgeted for. And since that student is no longer with us, that money is now, we consider that a reduction. You know, that's a concrete savings. Students that are going to move into our town are going to move into our town regardless of whether that student has moved along or has not. So we look at that money as a concrete. It was budgeted $66,000. We were able to reduce our budget by $66,000. And what happens with our special education students moving in or out has no bearing on that $66,000. Regarding Mr. Gilroy's comments here, as Mr. Gilroy has asked numerous questions, and we've worked directly with him and members of the Finance Committee, the level of arrogance, I'm not sure where he has that, other than when we need to lean on the advice of our attorneys, then we do so, and we explain that quite clearly. And information that we can't provide, and we have provided information on numerous occasions to the Finance Committee in the request. We've provided that.
Thank you.
Nancy Donahue, Precinct 9. I've gone through all of the literature that I've received this evening, and I don't see a budget where people are quoting itemized items. Where do I find that in what you gave us? Also, what we received, we cannot even read. So what, I'd like to see something that I could look at.
Do you have the spiraled thing?
I have this. What page is it itemized on? I'm looking for it.
This has been on the website for 2 months now, 3 months. We've been going over this.
Oh, I understand that, but I can't read what has been given to me this evening on each school and so on. And I just wondered, if there's any way you can blow that up so we can see it.
Well, I can't answer that other than to say that it is the responsibility of the town meeting reps to pay attention, and this information.
I have paid attention, believe me.
Well, ma'am.
Excuse me, I have paid attention.
Again, the budget was on the town website for 2 months, and it's available.
But do I personally have to print that entire, there's nothing that you can
I'm not
give me?
asking you to print anything, but by the same token, I think it's difficult to review an entire $52 million budget well, we've been here 2.5 hours, to be honest with you, when we have other business.
But I don't mean specifically that, but the handout we have this evening by school, I can't read any of it.
Well,
and I just wondered if there was a way that the gentleman who's over here can blow that up so we can read it?
It's not possible to do that, and that's one of the reasons why we opted for trying to have it available to you on a smart device, because you may be able to increase the size on your smart device.
I have that. We have the computer at our table, sir, and we can't. And it's still very peewee.
Well, it's part of the problem. We've been having it ever since I've been a town meeting rep in the early 2000s. There's not much that you can do to make the screens larger, or unless you wanted to have like one column on a page.
Well, I just wondered. You can't. Read
I understand what you're saying.
Mr. Moderator, we're in the debate time now.
We are.
Okay, Glenn Thorin, Precinct 5. Many of us in this town meeting have been through numerous meetings with the tri-boards and the school committee and looked at this budget in the larger document where you can get it on the computer, and some of us have looked at it until we're almost cross-eyed. But the big point here in passing this budget, even though it is a little bit tight, and we have to admit to that, is what's different about this number and how this number was arrived at and how these numbers are going to be dealt with next year compared to last year. I want to make a comment to the entire town meeting that Frank Antonelli has done a superlative job in getting the accounts straightened out. Not a good job, not an excellent job, a superlative job. So you can count on the fact that if you've read the budget, you know where the money is coming from, you know where the money is going, and you know how the money is going to get there. There are changes that are occasionally made during the year that will now pass through the school committee for their review, even at smaller dollar amounts that were moving around last year. So the confidence level that I have in that this budget will be managed well next year is 1,000% higher than it was looking at the problems we had this year. So even though the budget is a number that's a little bit less than some would desire, it's been looked at very carefully, and the main difference here is you now have a controllable process with account numbers that represent where the money actually is being used, and you can count on the fact that not only the administration, but the school committee will have clear visibility on where the dollars reside, what the budget's being spent for, how the dollars are being moved. This is a major earth-shattering change in how the school committee budget will be handled. So it's not just the number that I'm looking at, it's the process of how the entire budget's going to be dealt with over the next year. Even though it's tight, I urge you to support this budget and watch carefully as how the process evolves with the line items and the money moving and how the budget is met throughout the entire year. It will be completely different, and those of you who have attended the other meetings will know that. So I urge you to support this budget.
Thank you.
I first want to say that I agree with all the comments of the previous speaker. I do want to encourage everyone to support this budget. There's a lot that's changed since last year. I want to thank both the Franks for their hard work, the Finance Committee, the School Committee. A lot has gone into this budget. There's been tri-board meetings, and the work isn't going to end tonight. I'm thoroughly impressed by all of the effort that's gone into this and all of the changes that have taken place. They've taken the audit reports, and they've made incredible change. They've been trying to tell the community about it. They've come to selectmen meetings. Al Thomas was on the radio last week. We're going to continue to have tri-board meetings. We're going to continue to have the school committee come into Board of Selectmen meetings. We're going to continue the dialogue, and we're going to continue to keep the transparency in the community on this budget as open as possible, and we're going to continue to review this budget moving forward. This is the first year in a year of tremendous change, but a lot of work has gone into this budget, and a lot of work is going to continue to go into it. And my last comment would just be, again, to Frank, both of the Franks, especially Frank Tiano, I'd just like to point out student achievement has not suffered as a result of this one year we had a budget mishap, but the Chelmsford school system is still fantastic. Our students are still achieving at an incredible level, but please support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion? No more discussion. There being none, we shall vote on the school budget. 35 seconds. A yes vote means that you're in favor of the school budget as presented.
And 35 seconds isn't nearly enough time to sort of summarize what you've been hearing here. It is, as Glenn Thorne pointed out, a very different feel to the budget. There is been a lot of work to make it more transparent, and unfortunately, it's still not the robust budget that I think the school committee and outgoing Superintendent Frank Tiano would like. But it seems to have very strong support from the town meeting reps, as you can see there on the board.
See it correctly, it's 125 in favor, 15 opposed, and 2 abstentions. Is that correct? Yes, correct. Article 125, 15, 2. Article passes. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 6 is the fiscal year operating budget for the other general government departments of the town. As per the town's custom, we have it by line item. As you can see, municipal administration, personnel expenses, public safety, public works, facilities, cemetery, community services, library, benefits and insurance, debt service. Let me just give an overview and provide you with detail in terms of how we've pulled the budget together and why, after the 5 months of work with John Souza, my finance director, and with the oversight of the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee, we feel this is a sound financial plan for the community. What we've done here is we've maintained the existing level of government services. There are no increases in staffing levels for general government employees. We've maintained a capital infrastructure investment at $3 million, which will be coming forth in a Article 12 late, at another session, obviously. However, we carried the interest cost for that first year in that plan. And we've maintained our funding plan for the other post-employment benefits, OPEB, or really what's better known as retiree health insurance liability at $1 million. The priorities remain the same: education, public safety, which includes police and fire as well as public works, capital infrastructure, and public health and services. Now getting into the numbers. The budget that's there, as you can see, we have an increase of 2.66% overall. And you can see a lot of the numbers really just jump out at you, some of them being small and some of them being large. As you can see in municipal administration overall, it's a level dollar budget of a slight change of less than $2,300. The public schools, as we just voted, we've provided an increase of over $1.5 million, or 3%. For Neshoba Tech, the assessment earlier this evening was a 9.7% increase, or $250,000. The public safety budget actually decreases by $150,000. And let me explain what's going on here. Two factors. When we talk about a level service budget, we don't include extraordinary one-time expenditures within a year because by nature they're extraordinary and we're not going to budget for them to occur again. So last fall we had to address funding, for example, in the fire department due to extended injuries and absence from work and so forth. Well, we're not anticipating that that's going to happen in the year ahead, so we basically go off of that amount, a true zero-based budget. Also to note, and you'll see this in another article later in the meeting, we have not reached agreements with our two police unions, the patrol union and the sergeants union. So therefore, that will have to be funded at a future town meeting. In the area of public works, you can see it's a modest increase of almost $74,000. As I mentioned in the earlier article, we have put in a significant increase in facilities of over $115,000. Cemeteries, you can see, is almost a level dollar. Community services, as you can see, it's a significant increase, almost 14%, or $135,000. As you'll see later, that's veteran services. You remember we had to fund an increase this year. We're funding a $95,000 increase in the budget for the year ahead because of our expected caseload. Library budget corresponds to the overall budget increase. You can see benefits and insurance. That's a big one. $1.3 million, almost 7%. And we'll touch upon this a little deeper in this presentation. Our debt service goes down by $500,000. And the good news for the tax levy, that decrease is really to the excluded debt. So therefore, that comes right off. That money will not be used elsewhere in the budget because it was voted separately on the ballot only for those purposes. And we keep paying down the debt service on the school project and so forth. The reserve fund we left unchanged. That'll be in a future article. And we do have an increase, unfortunately, of almost $300,000 in our state assessments. And you'll see how that really provides us with little state funding in a few moments. In a more narrow perspective, and what I want to point out here, well, again, you can see the summary. And the key that I'd point out to you, since we're on the other town departments, you see almost the second line from the bottom. I'm asking for $230,000 more for all the other town departments, or less than a 1% increase. So you can see we really are holding the line. As you can tell, no increase in positions and really not any significant increase in expenditures while we're funding in a 2% increase in the pay scales of our employees. So again, where did the money go? As we talked earlier, the schools, the tech school, health insurance. We had a 7% increase in our health insurance premium. And that was in addition to higher copays and deductibles for our health plan as we continue to mirror the state's health insurance plan. So basically what's going to happen is our employees are subject to higher copays, deductibles, and as well as a 7% increase in their premiums. And also the town is subject to 75% of that premium increase. So you can see the increase is over almost $650,000. And for the employees and retirees, basically any COLA or other increase they have, if they're on health insurance, it's going right into that benefit. For state assessments, as I mentioned earlier, we're up significantly, and I talked about the facilities and the veterans benefits. As was mentioned earlier, we were unable to fund over $618,000 in the school department's request. And I know that the school request was solid, but there were other requests across the town that are also not funded, and they're legitimate as well. But we only have so many dollars available. The police department can make a legitimate case for a lieutenant position. We do not have a lieutenant position on the third shift in this community. The fire department can make a legitimate case for staffing, additional staffing in the center station. Same thing with the highway department. We're also lacking in our transportation for seniors, and as I mentioned earlier about building maintenance. So again, what's the change? Well, we're funding a $119 million budget, and unfortunately you can see the bulk of the increase comes from the property tax. almost 3 million of that, of 3.7 million comes from the property tax. The state aid, the gross number is $325,000. And we've also bumped the local receipts, which is basically motor vehicle excise tax. And we have a decrease in available funds we'll touch upon later. So again, how did we fare in the state budget? And as we're here in town meeting this week, the state House of Representatives is dealing with their version of the state's budget. And as we said, the budget is fluid, and we'll see where we are at the end of this week when they finish all their amendments and votes. And then next month, the Senate will do its version. And then at the end of June, they'll get a consolidated budget on the governor's desk for July 1st, and then we'll know for certain where the numbers are. And as you can imagine, we'll come back in the fall and make some adjustments. The key thing, though, is in the governor's budget, the net increase, after the state assessments, was $28,000. Well, if you remember some of the items we talked about, $28,000 from the state's not going to get us anywhere. The Chapter 70 increase, the governor proposed a minimum of $20 per student to the communities. That gives us an extra $101,000 to almost $10.5 million. The House budget that's being debated increases that increased amount by another $26,000. It gets us to about $25 per student. There are amendments. We'll see what happens when it's done. But the bottom line is, folks, as we've known year after year, we're not receiving our adequate share of state revenues. And if you go back a decade or two where we were, when you take inflation and everything else into effect, we're almost 40% less funded than we were at the start of this century. It's an unfortunate case, although we do see the new governor is increasing for the first time the unrestricted general government aid. But again, you'll see how that is lessed out because we get assessed tuition assessments. Our charter school reimbursement is reduced by $57,000. The amount that the state reimburses communities for exemptions for veterans and blind and elderly, that was reduced. The school choice and charter school tuition assessments increased by $188,000 to almost $1.8 million. So we absorbed that in the budget. Then the schools, how it works, so you understand this, the schools, when they do school choice, that doesn't come into our budget. That's the discretion of the school committee to expend. So they have the cushion, and that is their cushion. The question was asked in the previous article, what do they have for a cushion if things don't go well? That's their cushion of a few $100,000, their school choice monies. In the meantime, in the general government of the bound, we absorb the assessments for charter schools and school choice into our operating budget for the community. That's how it works in Massachusetts. Volume of activities and departments. We've given you some call volumes for police department the past year. The whole case is to see that we're responding to more calls with the same number of officers that we had going back to the pre-recession days. Same thing in the fire department. You can see a dramatic increase, keeping the same number of firefighters. Here's where it hurts. Retirement assessment, 9.44%, over $600,000 for the retirees of this community in terms of what we're paying into that system. And John Suzu, our treasurer, sits on the retirement board as our representative. And obviously we inquire about this because this is rather high. And we were told this is an accurate number. They do it every 2 years. You've got an actuarial basis, and it's based upon your payroll and your employees. And as you can see, we're adding some employees on the school side. In terms of the history, you can see the situation. You can see how, if you go back to 2010, we're paying $5.6 million for county retirement assessment. We're up now to $7.1 million. And again, this most recent increase of 9.4%. If you look inside that assessment, the key number on this chart is the fifth column, payment on unfunded liability, $5.778 million. So of the 7.1 that we're going to fund, 5.8 of it goes to the unfunded pension liability that we're going to be paying through the year 2035. As you can see, they do it every 2 years. The new actuarial liability in what was a rather healthy stock market return, we have an increase of $8.9 million, 11.19%. You can see that this is an $800,000 increase in our unfunded pension liability from the current fiscal year. And you can see at the last line, the assessment for next year, they already told us because it's a 2-year assessment, we're going to go up by another $456,000 next year as we start looking to next year's budget. OPEB, the retiree health insurance liability. For the last year we closed out, our required contribution was $3.2 million. The interest on our OPEB obligation was over $4 million. The adjustments to that account come out to 7.8. This community as a whole contributed 4.8 million, which meant that our OPEB obligation will increase by over $3 million this past year. We are now in the process of doing a new OPEB actuarial study that we do every 2 years. We will have that data for you for the fall town meeting when that study is complete. But our best estimates that we know, that in our OPEB liability, it was 86.7. We believe it's increased by 3.8. We're funding at $1 million in our operating budget. However, that's only 43% of the annual amount of the 2.3 million if we wanted to draw down this liability per the recommended levels over a 30-year period. So it's a short way of saying, folks, we're not paying our true cost of current obligations as we operate in the year, and therefore our deficit in OPEB is going to increase as we move forward, even with this budget. So you can see the big concern for the community is we have an unfunded pension liability of 88.4 million. We've got an unfunded OPEB liability that's 86.7 million. We have $175 million of unfunded liabilities. We're budgeting 5.8 million because we're required to under state law for the pension, unfunded pension liability, and we're putting $1 million towards the unfunded OPEB liability as we move forward. Veterans benefits, again, I just wanted to point out the dramatic increase of where we're now budgeting 275 for the upcoming year is our best estimate. The good news is we will receive a reimbursement of that. However, the state reimbursement lags by 12 months, so we pick up the cost in the meantime. Debt service. It's always a question about debt service. We had our bond rating reaffirmed back in December a few months ago, and the key thing that comes out of that report is that our overall net debt, after taking into account state aid reimbursements on school-related debt and self-supporting debt, which is basically the school debt and the sewer project, is low, and the rate is opinion at 2% of our market value of a community. They also point out that our debt amortization, meaning how we're paying off our debt, is rapid, with 78% of the principal to be retired in 10 years. What we have for non-excluded debt service, such as our capital plan and the fire station project and so forth, basically it's almost level funded. We've got a nominal increase of $4,000 for the year ahead. For our excluded debt service, as I mentioned earlier, it's a $500,000 decrease because we're paying down the principal and interest on the school project, the DPW land acquisition, in the early phases of the sewer project. Again, here are just the detailed numbers on our employees. As you can see, we're at the same level that we were back in 2008, pre-recession. Again, when we look at our revenue sources, how do we develop this budget? We can see that the reliance on the property tax, $2.5 million, which is $2 million, which is the 2.5% increase in the levy allowed under Proposition 2.5. We project new growth at 1.35 million. Our gross state aid of 324,000, our local receipts 477, and our available funds going down. Again, I know it's hard to see this property tax. Again, the key here is that we're estimating 1.35 in new growth. That's not a conservative number. This past year we were 1.4. The 1.35 is the second, would be the second highest over the last 5 years. So again, we're trying to be realistic with our budget. What does the property tax fund? You know, we're mindful of the property tax, that it's $6,329 is the average single-family bill in the community. You know, the key to point out, again, obviously most funding goes towards schools. However, the thing to note is benefits and insurance towards the bottom. Over $1,000 of that $6,000 goes towards paying benefits and insurance, or over 16% of the budget. I always put this chart on every meeting. How are things changing with the property tax bill relative over time? As you can see, the bottom right-hand column, our ranking as a community, 1 would be the highest average single-family bill in the Commonwealth, you know, and then it goes down from there. We are currently ranked for the year we just finished at 69 for the year we're in right now. As you compare where that's been, in recent years, we've been around 70. If you go back a decade, we were around 63. So yes, taxes are going up in Chelmsford, and we are mindful of the fact they've gone up $1,000 in the last 5 years. However, folks, they're going up everywhere. State aid, again, we give you the detail of the numbers. Again, the bulk of state aid is Chapter 70, which is your education funding, and the general government aid of over $4.7 million. Local receipts, again, over half of our local receipts is the motor vehicle excise tax. Again, we're estimating for the year coming up, we're at $4.6 million. Motor vehicle tends to be cyclical. We think we're peaking out at motor vehicle based upon the fact that this past year we were at 4.7 million, and we think that this year we'll be around that number or slightly ahead. A car is a bit of an item that people can postpone in difficult times, and if you go back a few years, you can see that was the case. We were at 4.25 million, 4.1 million, 4.1 million. So again, we're not being overly conservative. Available funds. These are the other things that go into the budget, such as the sewer betterments. I think the key in this one is the free cash stabilization fund. We're proposing to use $500,000 from the stabilization fund to balance this budget. As you may recall, when we were here a year ago, we left this meeting with an unbalanced budget. And I assured you that when we came back in the fall, we would be able to successfully balance that budget. And we did. When all the dust settled and everything else, when all the numbers came in, our free cash was certified, new growth was certified, and everything else, and all the issues we dealt with in the fall, our budget was balanced because in Massachusetts, you have no choice. You cannot operate a community unless when you go to set your tax rate by December, you have to have a balanced budget. Well, this year we're in the same scenario. The Board of Selectmen basically met and said, we don't want you to leave town meeting this year with an unbalanced budget. And so respectfully looked over the needs of the community, recognized the priorities of the community, recognized the need for services and so forth, and in considering their directive, we're not leaving here with required action in the fall. Instead, and I characterize it as a distinction without a difference, I'm proposing to take $500,000 from the stabilization fund, and then once everything settles in the fall, we'll replenish that account with the free cash, and therefore our stabilization fund will be restored. And as long as we do that, because we know as a community, we are going to generate free cash every year. And the reason for that, and not just us, it's every community, the reason for that is because it's the situation between reality versus budget. We know there'll be turnbacks from town departments that don't fully use their appropriation. We also know that there are situations where your revenues come in different than your forecast. And this year, we know as we sit here this evening that we've had some beneficial outcomes that will generate more than $500,000 in free cash. We believe it'll be over $1 million before the year is done when the books close. And that has to do with the fact that we got $400,000 from the payment from the Glenview Sand and Gravel project when they finally moved forward, and per the agreement with the town, they paid the back taxes and penalties on their project. We also note, as I said earlier, our motor vehicle excise tax is coming in higher than forecast. And we also know that our property taxes are coming in strong. So it's a matter of sound principle, and this, again, was the policy that this town meeting and the previous manager did throughout the last decade of basically transferring from stabilization to support the budget at the spring in town meeting and going forward. What we've got to be mindful of is we can't fall into a situation where we're taking out more than we're replenishing, and I'm confident that with the amount of the $500,000 at this town meeting, mindful of the fact that we will have to come back and settle the contracts that aren't settled with the police unions, we are mindful of the fact that we'll be able to restore that. So basically, folks, as I said at the selectmen's meeting, we're up against the wall in terms of our funding situation. There's only so much we can do. As was noted earlier accurately, the school budget is tight. No doubt about it. All town budgets are tight. And therefore, we recognize that the state aid, let's be clear, we've got a new governor who we've seen in his first few months, 100 days of office. He's not inclined to raise taxes at the state level. We also have a Speaker of the House who's very similar in that feeling. So there isn't going to be this magical, relief from the state in terms of significant dollars coming forward. So in essence, this is the new reality. And the concern part that we have as we go forward into the years ahead is a lot of these items aren't going to change. We are going to continue to receive increases in our pension assessment. We're going to continue to receive increases in health insurance. We're going to have to negotiate all of our new collective bargaining agreements in the upcoming fiscal year because they all expire at the end of this budget that we're now approving this evening. And again, we know special ed costs are going to be there. So the bottom line is this is the new reality, And we are going to the point that we can to maintain the level of services that marks this community. Again, there is no cushion. However, we believe it's responsible. We believe this budget fulfills the principles and desires of this community. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Now is the time for question and answer.
My name is Paul Regazio, 25 Clover Hill, Precinct 7th. I'm amazed at the amount of information that's available on the municipal budget and the lack of information that's provided on the school budget. I was unaware that as a new town meeting member that I was supposed to go to the website and find information on the school budget. I would hope that in the future meetings that we have some of these schedules. The only schedule I see in the school budget is the 52.4 million and some head count numbers. And again, I think the town committee or the town meeting members need more information. You know, they don't need the 1,000 accounts that the school committee talked about, but I think some summary can be provided to the town meeting members. I don't know if anybody can answer the reason why the school committee doesn't provide that, at least at this meeting.
Well, for one thing, there was a public meeting, which most of us attended, which went in more detail. And we've been dealing with the various statistics at our meetings for the last year. So I'm sorry if you haven't been able to avail yourself of that, but there are no secrets.
Well, some summary can be provided at this meeting in the future. Thank you.
Scott Davidson, Precinct 3. 2 questions for the town manager, real quick. On side 105 on the local receipts, I just had a question about the motor vehicle excise tax. On side 105, the motor vehicle excise tax.
Yep.
You have budgeted for 4.6 million.
Yep.
Fiscal year 2015 was budgeted 4.25 million. Do we have any idea how close we are to tracking to that budgeted number for 2015?
We're ahead of 2014 schedule at this point last year. So what we're seeing is we're probably going to finish around 4.8 million or so this year. What we did see, and you probably read it, but we read the same papers and everything else, we saw that automobile sales started tapering in March. So we monitor it. What happens is for people who own an existing car during the past year, you get your bill in January, February timeframe. And then what happens is for car transactions during the course of the year, the state sends out supplemental budgets. And what they, in terms of supplemental motor vehicle assessments, and that's what happens is, so we track those year to date, and at this point we're trending towards about 4.8 million for this year. But again, we think that we sort of hit that peak, and we expect that, again, we're budgeting for a period that's going to start this July through June 30th. We think that will be reduced down to 4.6 next year.
Thank you. And on slide 101, with regards to the property tax, could you just provide a little more context on how the new growth number is sort of calculated? It seems to vary a lot from year to year.
Yeah, new growth is defined under Proposition 2.5. How it is calculated is by the Board of Assessors. It's new growth as a result of construction. So what we see as an indicator is permit level activity in terms of people who put additions onto homes, or for example, if they renovate the Stop and Shop, Marshall's Plaza, that's new growth because basically it's a capital improvement to a facility. And so what we do is we examine trends and then we look at permit activity as an indicator for new growth. And so what we're seeing thus far is a healthy this year. Now again, it's new growth as of June 30th. And so that's how the cycle works. So basically, we won't know the actual new growth until the end of the summer. So that's how that process works.
Thank you.
Bob Joyce, Precinct 1, 103 Turnpike Road. Mr. Manager, under available funds, there are 2 sewer items, sewer betterments and free cash, sewer user fees. Do those go in the regular free cash? Don't they go in a specific free cash for sewers?
No.
They don't.
Sewer betterments are funds from the, as they indicate, that comes from the sewer betterment assessment that is used to fund the debt service on the sewer project.
Right.
There is a capital plan for the sewer project that goes till 2032 for the sewer project. That funded, again, early phases of the project were done through 2.5 debt exclusions. The middle phases were funded through betterments during the process, and then the last phase with a capital assessment fee. So we have that $2.4 million on hand from previous betterment assessments that are earning interest. We then transfer that amount for the debt service for the given year. I believe we tap out of betterment funds within 3 years or so. And then basically you're then going to see sewer capital fees. Now, the sewer user fees offset are basically services that the town supports for the sewer operation. So, for example, health insurance benefits, work in the collector's office, the accounting office, and so forth, that supports the sewer enterprise operation. We then get reimbursed for those actual costs. So that's how that works.
Okay, and one other question. The debt that's exempt debt, like the old sewer.
Yep.
And the police.
And the school, no,
Yeah.
it's a school project, the high school, middle school project,
Right.
the DPW acquisition, and the sewer project are the three categories of
Right,
exempt debt.
right, there was never one on library. Now, that's gonna decrease like 450,000 or something like that.
It's actually $500,000, right?
$500,000.
Mhm.
Now, one would expect, because that was an exempt vote, that $450,000 would be returned to the taxpayers, because that should only be a one-time, in other words, once they pay it off, they should be able to shut that money off and not use it for other budget items. Is that true?
And that's exactly what's happening. The amount that's being shut off is dropping from $5 million down to $4.57 million. And basically, the exempt debt covers the debt service for the project.
Right.
So the school project still has a few years to go because it was approved in 2004. I believe we funded it in 2007. So it's going to go for another decade. That amount declines every year because what a community does is we pay level principal every year. So we take a 20th of the amount, pay off a 20th every year. Therefore, the interest that's remaining on the lower principal goes down every year. And the same thing with the sewer debt. So what you're seeing is the $500,000 decrease comes out of the levy because we can't reassign those dollars. It's excluded, meaning hence the word limited to that debt. So therefore, it's not part of our base levy. It's an add-on. And if you look at how I presented the property tax, you'll see that it's a separate line. You can see we just have the base levy, the increase, the new growth. That's the total base levy. What goes on in addition to that is the exempt debt. So therefore, those numbers are not commingled.
Okay, thank you.
Brian Latina, Precinct 4. Mr. Moderator, the budget here on page 40 shows public safety going down $150,000, and it shows on page 38, public safety $10,664,000 and some dollars. The police unions haven't had a increase in 2 years or more. How much money is in this budget for the police unions, assuming that we're going to pay them retroactively for 2 years in this year between now and the fall? How much is in here for that increase?
The answer is zero, and that's because we have a town bylaw that prohibits the appropriation of money in advance of a settled contract. That's how it works in Chelmsford. We cannot set money into a budget prior to the execution of an agreement with a bargaining unit. So you're correct. We are now into our third year of an unsettled agreement in the year coming up ahead. We are going before the State Arbitration Board, known as the JLMC, Joint Labor Management Committee. That's a special state agency that handles labor disputes between police and fire. We anticipate that meeting will take place over the summer. We may not have a resolution at Fall Town meeting. However, as I noted earlier, we will have to fund not only the year ahead, but also the retroactive amount for that contract. That number is in the six figures. There's no question. It's going to be over $100,000 by the time you fund all those amounts for those two groups of employees. So yes, that is an outgoing thing. But again, we are prohibited from putting that money into the budget at this time under the town bylaws.
Okay, so the $60,000 when the child left special ed, we take that out, but we don't put anything at all in for the very likely case of us increasing our police budget this year?
Well, because we can't.
Because we
Yeah,
can't.
we know it's there, but we can't. And the same thing's going to happen, in any time that you don't have a settled contract. So, again, if we're coming here a year from now and we don't have other agreements that aren't settled for the upcoming year, we're going to have the same problem, in the same situation. You have to know it's there, but you can't set the money aside into a budget because it hasn't been approved.
Okay, and if I'm being prudent and assuming that we're going to pay this by the fall, I would probably assume that we're paying it out of the free cash and/or the stabilization budget, given that we probably will really pay $100,000 or more towards.
Yeah, that's correct. Right, if barring anything unforeseen, that the amount that we'll have to fund will be probably over $600,000. That's correct.
Okay, so we're being told 5, but it's 6. or
Right, we
more.
know it's there. That's correct.
Thank you.
Tom Moran, Precinct 8. The lottery under state aid doesn't show any revenue. And, every time I see a commercial for lottery, it says they give money to the cities and towns. Are we missing something here?
That's because over 6 years ago, that the governor and the legislature combined the lottery and the additional assistance into an account known as unrestricted general government aid. So that's the line below it. So that's why we left it there to people to follow. Lottery additional assistance is now under one umbrella called unrestricted general government aid. So was the former lottery money.
Good, I'm glad, because if I buy a lottery ticket, I want some money to come back.
Are there any more questions for the town manager? There being none, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee unanimously recommends this article for approval.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Yes, the Board of Selectmen recommends approval by a 3-2 vote.
We do have an amendment that has been filed by Laura Merrill, and if, Mrs. Merrill, if you wish to go to the microphone and explain it, but I will read it. She wants to strike $500,000 from the General Stabilization Fund and reduce benefits and insurance, OPEB, by $500,000.
You go up there.
Hi. At this point, I would like to not dip into a stabilization fund. My understanding of the stabilization fund is it is not for regularly budgeted items, and so I don't really feel that coming to town meeting with the stabilization fund money built into our regularly budgeted items is actually goes towards our policy. I think it is a semantic of whether we're 500,000 short or taking it out of the stabilization fund. We've heard here over the course of the evening that there are a lot of items that are not going to get changed in terms of our ability to get more funding from the state. There are a lot of unknowns in terms of our collective bargaining, potential school budget overruns, unknown litigation and settlement costs for the schools. These are different items that the Finance Committee and School Committee has brought up. I feel that when we come to fall meeting and we know how much money that we have in our free cash and also what some of these other items are going to cost us, we'll be in a better position to decide whether the $500,000 is going to be enough. And, I was here, I was following the news when the previous town manager began dipping into the stabilization fund as part of the budgeting. It became kind of a slippery slope. The first year it was a small amount. The second year, changes in the economy and other expenses came up, so we had to take a little bit more. And I think it's a slippery slope to include this as a standard budget, so my proposal would be to hold off, fund half of the OPEB amount now, and then when we get to fall meeting, decide if we can give 500,000, more than 500,000. We'll have a much better idea of what our free cash as well as our unknown expenses are. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for the proponent of the amendment? Or comments?
Comments? I have comments. Do you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Beth Logan, Precinct 3. Was this amendment brought up in the Board of Selectmen meeting when they discussed the budget? And if so, was it voted on, and what was that vote?
Well, this was discussed in our meeting, and I think it's why there were some dissenting votes on the town manager's budget, but it is the town manager's budget. We don't take votes at our meeting to amend his budget line item by line item. So there was no vote taken on whether or not to make this change. It was brought up, I think, that it may be brought up as an amendment here at town meeting, though.
Go ahead.
Mr. Moderator, I'm at this mic because this is debate. I'd asked the town meeting not to approve this amendment, and let me explain why. Two things are going to happen before town meeting that are important. One, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be completing our OPEB actuarial study. The value in the actuarial value, that's going to depend upon the town's annual contribution towards OPEB. We have basically had the practice now for a couple of years and believe going forward that this community would put $1 million. If it's only going to be $500,000, we're going to have to change the actuarial assumptions, which will change our actuarial results. Second, and probably more importantly, prior to fall town meeting, we're going to have to go out and borrow and get rated again by our bond rating agency, because hopefully at next session you will approve a capital plan of over $3 million to borrow. We're going to have to sit down with Standard & Poor's, review our financials, and a key part of their financials, as we know, is how is the town funding OPEB? And we'll have to tell them that apparently we're no longer funding at a commitment of $1 million. We left town meeting and the amount was stricken from $1 million to $500,000. And so therefore that again will not look favorably upon the town's credit worthiness. And third, I just don't like cutting OPEB. As I mentioned earlier, it's a real cost of funding the town's operations on an annual basis. It recognizes the obligation going forward. And it's not just Chelmsford who's funding OPEB anymore. As I'm sure the chairman of the Board of Selectmen can assure you, the town of Westford appropriated over $700,000 towards their OPEB obligation in their budget going forward in the upcoming fiscal year. The town of Littleton, again, a community with a smaller size, they budgeted over $665 as part of their benefits article in their budget for the year going ahead. And on you can go on to Acton and so forth. The bottom line is it belongs in our budget, it belongs to be funded, and it really states a statement of the financial responsibility of the town. And again, the reason for why do we cut OPEB is because there's nothing else that anybody wants to cut. That's the truth of it. And so therefore the question becomes with OPEB, and this is why I'm uncomfortable, again, even with the $1 million funding level, is because, again, we're sort of kicking a deficit down the road, much like we saw earlier this evening on the pension deficit. You know, in terms of what is costing us as a community, and the more we pass on, the harder those who come after us are going to have to balance their budget as they move forward. So again, I respect your consideration, and I would ask that you fund this. I can tell you I have a proven track record. I budgeted through the worst economic recession in 2008, and we came through that with a balanced budget. And gosh darn it, if we have to do it again, I'll deliver with my financial team and come to the town with a financial budget. I'm not going down any slippery slope.
Mr. Moderator, Sam Chase, Precinct 1. I certainly agree with everything the town manager said. But one thing he did say was, and I don't know if this is his opinion or if this is a result of a discussion that he had with the Board of Selectmen, he said, the reason that we're proposed to cut $500,000 out of the OPEB budget is because they don't want to cut anything else. So I would like to, through you, ask the selectmen who approve the budget if that's a true statement. And if it isn't, I would like to have them tell me what else could be cut in lieu of $500,000 worth of OPEB.
Mr. Chase, could you clarify exactly what you are asking us?
The town manager just made a statement, and I think it is in the form of his opinion, and I'm guessing that it's a result of his conversation with the Board of Selectmen at some point, that the reason the proposal has just been made to take $500,000 out of the OPEB appropriation is that there's nothing else to cut, or there was no will by the board to cut anything else. And I want to know if that's an accurate statement. So if anybody from the Board of Selectmen could explain that, I would like an answer. Thank you.
I'm sure we can.
Start with me if you want.
Sure.
Seeing I'm up here.
You're up there.
I think that's partially true. We have certainly set a precedence of school, police, fire, DPW. Those are our goals that we want to protect. And as as the town manager has said numerous times, our backs are against the wall. So we can either cut OPEB, and we're not talking about cutting it completely because we'd come back in the fall and look at free cash, or start counting bodies that are going to go. Police, fire, school department, they got a sizable increase, and so that's really part of it. What are you going to cut? I can remember when I was on the Board of Selectmen years ago, Bernie Lynch used to say, you can cut all you want, but show me where to cut it. And at this point, we don't have any other place to cut it. And OPEB was the sins of the previous people that served on these boards that gave benefits to those people way back then. And then it set stalemate for a long time, and nobody cared about it. And then all of a sudden, it became an issue, like the county assessment. We can't question the county assessment because that's it. But we certainly can decide how much money we want to put into OPEB, because as you've seen from the manager's remarks, every town has a different amount. And if we don't have a free fall of money somewhere, then we have to decide what things we're going to do. And certainly education, police, fire, DPW are very important to us. And I don't want to leave out all the other departments that are just as important to us, like Board of Health and what have you. But I think we have to do something. I think the people in this town have spoken that they want to see some changes. They not only want to see cuts in like OPEB, they want to see cuts in budgets, which we're not even doing. So with that, I hope you'll support that we move it to the fall, and then we actually take the money at that point. Thank you.
All right. And were you still answering Mr. Chase's question as a board?
Yes, the rest of the board.
Just want to make sure. Sam, I think I'll let everyone else speak. I think I would agree with that sentiment. People want lower taxes and more services, and you can't do that. So, yeah.
Scott Davidson, Precinct 3. Are we still in Q&A, or is this debate?
Well, well, hold on. The school, the Board of Selectmen were asked a question,
Oh, okay. I
and
thought they had
only
finished.
now two of them have responded.
Gotcha.
Well, it's Laura's article, so she doesn't have to. I mean, she's.
During that meeting, it was my intention to keep the appropriation at $1 million for OPEB.
So at the prior Board of Selectmen meeting where we voted on the budget, I mentioned there what I'll state again here. I do not believe that we should start our year with a deficit budget. I said that last year. I said this. I'm saying it again this year, and I'll say it every year that I can. I just don't think that's sound financial practice. And while I appreciate the town manager balancing the budget, I do not believe we should do that with stabilization money. As a matter of fact, Board of Selectmen policy states that reserves will not be used to fund recurring budget items. I believe we have a budget that we cannot afford. we have $1 million line item for OPEB. We can fund it $500,000 now. We would have a level, or we would have a balanced budget without having to dip into our stabilization fund. And then in the fall, when we have free cash, we can look at funding the $500,000 to OPEB and make it whole. That way we don't have all this drama about, you know, oh, it could affect our credit rating, and what am I going to say to S&P? And all. There's no drama. Start the year with a balanced budget. Don't dip into the stabilization fund. You did it last year. You started the year with a deficit budget. You're doing it this year. And if you look on page 8 of your pink warrant book, that's the plan through 2020. I mean, it baffles me that everyone thinks that this is okay. I really don't think you would manage your personal funds this way, and this is not your money. This is the money from the residents in this town. And if you pass this budget by starting with a deficit budget, shame on you. And by the way, one last thing. We did not allow the schools to start the year with a deficit budget. We took over $600,000 away from them. They're scrambling to find the money to hire back 2 5th grade teachers. 5th grade, which is a huge transitional year for our kids. Why didn't we allow them to start the year with a $100,000 deficit, take that out of the stabilization fund? I mean, why not? What's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? So are we saying the town can do that, but the schools can't? I mean, you really need to think about this. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Newcomb?
Tom Newcomb, Precinct 9. Mr. Moderator, if I may, I have a question for the town manager.
Sure.
Paul, there was a comment earlier about that OPEB is paying the sins of the past. My understanding is that it is that each year we're accumulating a liability, and that adds to the OPEB. So we're putting $1 million in that's going to offset it, but we're also accumulating an actuarial liability for our current employees. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'll get to the slide. The best way that we can calculate it, again, we're awaiting our new assessment, but here's what we believe. The past year, it ended in 14, our OPEB obligation increased by $3 million. And so therefore, a portion of it is the prior unfunded liability, but the portion of it is also our annual required contribution going forward. So yes, the simple answer to your question is yes. We're incurring it as a real cost today for people who are employed today for the current year.
Okay, so you're saying that the current year's liability is $4 million?
Yes.
Okay, so we, even with the funding of $1 million, we're only really funding, we're still losing ground.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, all right. I'm not a fan of dipping into stabilization fund, but I prefer this over last year with us having a non-balanced budget, so.
Scott Davidson, Precinct 3. Question for the Board of Selectmen. I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly. You said we have a policy to not use money from the stabilization fund to pay for recurring budget items. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. So question for the town manager. Do you believe that this is a recurring budget item and that we're using money from the stabilization fund to fund a recurring budget item?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, no, I do not believe that's the case. As I mentioned earlier, the town's budget ends in the fall when we go and set the tax rate in December. That's when the books are balanced. It's submitted, the recap sheet is submitted from the spring and fall town meetings to the Department of Revenue. We get approval of our tax rate. By that time, the money that I'm taking out at the spring town meeting, I intend to ask this town meeting in the fall to put that $500,000 or so back into the budget. So therefore, there is no use of stabilization to fund the amount going forward. I think what's taking place here, I don't know if I could explain, I think what's taking place here is the effort is to cut it now, and then we'll consider it in the fall. And then we know what that is, what we know, let's let's call the elephant in the room. We know what's going to take place in the fall. We'll have a free cash amount, and then the OPEB will be considered along with going below, using the free cash to reduce the tax levy below the 2.5 allowed amount. That's what the alternative scheme is. It's so if you cut the OPEB now, then there's a bigger amount to then debate over in terms of where that money is going to be used. That's the distinction without the difference.
Thank you.
Brian Latina, Precinct 4. I'm for this. I'd like to wait until the fall. I'd like to not go into deficit spending by using the stabilization fund. That is not what it is for. If you look at page 8 in your book, the reason that our new town manager, and I'll call him our new town manager for a reason in a second, was able to do what he did is because he was moving money into a pretty rigorous stabilization budget when the economy crashed. We put money aside for the purposes of a rainy day fund. That's what the stabilization fund is for, not for funding this operating budget of $500,000 between now and the fall. You just heard that we have at least $100,000 in the fire budget, in the police budget that we need to fund, at least. That's $600,000. We're going to get some other creep that comes into that. We need to start spending the money that we have available in our funds. We can't constantly go back to my wallet when I haven't gotten that 2 or 3% raise in the last 5 or 6 years that our town employees have gotten, and take it out of my retirement. And I'm speaking in terms of all of our folks that live in our town. We're taking money from them to help fund retirement that we didn't pay for in the last 20 years. Now, I called the town manager our new town manager because when we had one of our meetings, I think his first meeting, over in the high school new auditorium, I asked him how come we weren't funding this retirement budget at all at that time. And the answer was only one community was funding their budget to the appropriate amount. And at that time, this community should have been putting $7.5 million a year into retirement. He said, we're not funding it because nobody can afford it. Well, we can't afford to catch up off of the backs of the current taxpayers. That's the problem we've got here. So let's accept this amendment, look at the budget in the fall like we're supposed to do, and wait till then. And I'll add one more thing. Since this money is going toward our town employees, I think we have almost 1,000, more or less, retirees and employees. Ask them what to cut. Find a half million bucks that allows us to put this money back in at the end. I bet you they can find a few bucks here and there, and we can make up the difference. And one more thing. Westford was used as an example. Westford gets $3 to $6 million school budget money more than this town does. They can afford $750,000 towards their stabilization budget, and we're going to put $1 million in? Something's wrong with the numbers we're getting from the state, folks. And I would challenge the school committee to get some of the money that Westford is getting so we can put the appropriate amount in our stabilization budget and not take it out of here when it's not supposed to be. Thank you.
Jerry Lowe, Precinct 9. My question is more one of education. I know that corporations have cut out benefits for retirees in lieu of going bankrupt. GM, a lot of them even have cut pensions on people that were, already on a pension. So I'm just trying to understand OPEB, which is above and beyond pensions. How much is that is mandated, and how much is that negotiated during, with police and fire? Is that, what part of that are we working on in the future of bringing these down to what the average people that don't work in public office have to do for their retirement and their benefits? I mean, I don't get health insurance when I retire, and life insurance and a lot of other benefits. So,
Mr. Moderator, to respond to the question, it's not a collectively bargained issue, it's a state law requirement. Under the state law, that any employee who works an average of 20 or more hours per week and is in the employment of municipal government for 10 years or more is eligible for retiree benefits. There is discussion for OPEB reform at the state level. That is not being taken up this legislative session. We're hopeful that the new governor and the legislature may address that this fall or hopefully next year. However, at this point, it is not on the table, and the actions to be considered before the state finishes its budget on June 30th. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Just to follow on, so it's mandated, but is the amounts mandated per town? I mean,
The state requires that a community cannot go below 50% contribution for the retiree health insurance premiums for its employees. We contribute 63%. The Board of Selectmen, under recent case law from the Supreme Judicial Court, could reduce the retiree contribution from 63% to 50%. However, I don't contemplate that that's something the board's going to anticipate that that's something the board's going to contemplate doing, given the fact that most retirees are on a rather limited income level and obviously would be severely impacted with such a reduction. So, but yes, the bottom line is the amount is between 50 to 90%. We're at 63% for retirees, and it's been that way going back well over a decade.
Thank you.
Scott Davidson, Precinct 3. I strongly urge town meeting to reject this amendment. I work as an actuary for a large insurer, and I can tell you that these obligations are real. I think it's irresponsible of us to pass these obligations on to future generations. And I can tell you that the Standard & Poor's evaluation is not just a scare tactic. I've dealt with Standard & Poor's. It's something that they use to evaluate the financial health of a town. So I strongly urge that we reject this amendment. Thank you.
Jim Clancy, Precinct 2. Mr. Moderator, through you to the town manager. And just to echo what the previous speaker said as well, I just want to clarify a couple things. First of all, when it comes to the Standard & Poor's valuation, when is that being done?
We contemplate doing a borrowing in late July or so forth, so we would generally meet with Standard & Poor's probably late June.
Okay. And if we were to meet in late June and we've reduced it by $500,000, that would have an impact on what our credit rating would be?
It will be information that we will be obligated to pass along to them in full disclosure, and they will consider that as part of their evaluation upon the community.
Okay, thank you. When I look at finances, I want to look at where I get the best return. And actually, I can clarify one more thing through you, Mr. Moderator, to the town manager. Sorry. What is our rate of return on the stabilization fund?
I can have John answer that. He's the custodian of the account.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, the investments that we can are regulated by state law, where the stabilization trust funds are primarily invested in fixed income investments. I would say an average return for the previous year, it varies, is somewhere between 2.2 to 2.5%.
Thank you. I'm looking at rate of return, and I'm looking at what's going to benefit us most. And if we take $500,000 out of OPEB, it's going to affect our bond rating, which is adjusted in June or July. We're not going to see that return in the stabilization fund. We're going to see it in how we fund things going forward with the capital plan. I think it's irresponsible to shift something to somewhere where we're not going to see the same rate of return. We want to get the most bang for our buck, the most for our money. It's not going to be through this. I urge you not to vote yes on this.
Frances McDougall, Precinct 1. I'd like to move
the question, if I may?
Well, you're the only one up there, so if nobody else has any discussion, why don't we just vote on it and not move the question? Okay, so we're not, what? No, we have a warrant article before us. So we have an amendment. So we're going to vote on the amendment. A yes vote means that you're going to be cutting OPEB by $500,000.
Kelly Beatty for Chelmsford Telemedia. As you've seen, that amendment was put forward by our new selectman, Laura Merrill, just elected to the board. And this was, in some sense, anticipated. She campaigned on making the taxes that we pay more fair, giving money back to the taxpayers whenever possible.
It's a majority vote, not 2/3.
And so it's an interesting question that's been brought up concerning whether this $500,000 coming from free cash, which is essentially the town's rainy day fund, is it a cash flow move or is it actually a deficit spending? Those of us who've had to balance our checkbooks from paycheck to paycheck can certainly appreciate the delicacy of sometimes of getting all the figures to work out. As you see the gyrations going on to try to get a vote going here. Sometimes the electronic voting works well, and sometimes it is a little bit challenging. Okay, here we go.
While we're waiting, it's after 11 o'clock. There's a couple of announcements that I can make to get the announcements out of the way. On Thursday, April 30th, from 1:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at the Elks Lodge on 300 Littleton Road, Chelmsford, there will be a Chelmsford Community Blood Drive. Also, there was apparently there's a traffic problem at Westford Road by Lock Road. So the road is blocked off there, so just if you have to drive in that area, be prepared for a potential delay. It is, but I think we've got it now, I hope. Okay. 1 second. You know what? Why don't we just do it by a vote of hands? All those in favor of the warrant article amendment, the amendment only, which means it'll be reduction in the OPEB by $500,000, please raise your hands. All those opposed? The amendment fails. Now we will vote on the warrant article, hopefully in a second, maybe? Yes. No, there was no motion to move. I indicated we were not going to vote on a motion to move because there was nobody waiting behind. So we were voting on, and I made it very clear twice that we were voting on the amendment, and that a yes vote would be yes.
I'm sorry, I thought you were calling for a vote on the main article.
No. Now I'm calling for a vote on the main article. Okay. So this is on. We didn't debate it. Okay, so actually, we have to debate the main warrant article.
Thank you.
Okay? So I'll entertain any debate.
Claire Janot, Precinct 7. I just want to say that I was one of the vocal opponents to an unbalanced budget coming before the Springtown meeting last year. And while Paul has, or the manager has referred to this as a distinction without a difference, to me, there's a small difference because we're actually balancing this budget in the spring when I think we should, and we're making our commitment to fund this full liability for OPEB and all the other budget lines. So I wanted to just express my appreciation. I have a technical question. Since I don't know what the actual motion reads language-wise, where we're funding everything. Is that written and can it be shown? Because I assume that the use of stabilization requires a 2/3 vote, and so I'm just asking, is it a 2/3 vote for the entire budget article?
I believe it does. Yes. It is. 2/3 vote.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion regarding the annual budget? If there's none, this will require a 2/3 vote to approve the budget for fiscal year 2016.
It would
Okay, I have
seem
35
that the,
seconds. A
town
yes
meeting
vote is
reps
to
are
approve the
growing
budget as
kind of
submitted.
Weary, too tired to debate any
Article
longer. So
6.
here's the vote. It's looking overwhelmingly in favor, which means that we will be adjourning until Thursday night very quickly. We have gotten through 6 of the 22 warrant articles, and we have a special town meeting to deal with on Thursday night. Odds
Looks like
makers
the
in
final
Las
vote
Vegas
is 121 in favor, 12
will,
opposed,
probably
no
be
abstention.
in
The budget
favor
has
of
been
a third
approved.
meeting next Monday night.
We will be having a special town meeting on Thursday at 7:30, 7:29. I will be recusing myself since it involves grinder pumps. I will entertain a motion to adjourn, to resume after the special town meeting.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like
Yes.
to make that motion, please.
Okay, second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And the ayes have it. This has been the first of what promises to be an intensive set of discussions about the finances of the town. Actually, I thought the school committee discussion went a whole lot more smoothly than I expected it to. Likewise, the town's budget went fairly smoothly, at least compared to years past, where there was a lot of give and take, a fire engine here, funding for veterans there. Part of this is attributed to the transparency with the budget's preparation. And also there are these overshadowing larger issues, the OPEB, the offset pension employee benefits. And so we will resume on Thursday night at 7:30 to take up, actually 7:29 technically, to begin the special town meeting. Now that is interesting. That has to do with our current fiscal year and the fact that money that has been set aside from the sewer funds to handle the grinder pump maintenance, which the town has now assumed, are inadequate. There have been more complications with the grinder pumps in terms of problems and repairs and such than was anticipated. And so we actually need to have a special town meeting to approve more money in this fiscal year, in addition to more money in next fiscal year for the same issue. So if you're confused, don't worry. We'll explain it on Thursday night. We hope you'll join us then. I'm Kelly Beatty, thanking all of our volunteers for Chelmsford Telemedia and you for watching. We'll see you Thursday night.